Every time I touch Mac. Every time I touch Mac.
Explode the sunlight here, gentlemen. You explode the universe.
Every time I touch Mac. Every time I touch Mac.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The ACL is back, our most prestigious league. This is the week 4 of our tournament, the last one. Everything is going to be decided here. Who gets the bye to the last week of playoffs, who makes it to playoffs week 1, and who is cut out. And I will be here tonight, joined for the first 2 games by Deca.
Yeah, it's good to be back with you again, Sir Blackpea. Had a lot of fun casting in week 2, and some things have shaken up a lot since week 2, and some things have remained pretty much the same, right? So we want to just start off with consistency. Pitsy, right? Pitsy has been the kind of the pillar of consistency that we've seen so far this tournament. It's still competing, holding that number 1 spot, has held it for, I think, the entire event so far. Had to sub out the last 2 games of last week, but it's still a crazy consistent player. I believe has only bought forward 1 game that they have played this entire tournament. So definitely watching Pitsy and trying to see how they're going to fight to keep that number 1 spot. But we have a lot of other storylines kind of developing in here, Blackpea. What is kind of drawing your attention as we're getting ready for this first lobby?
Well, no doubt my attention is going to be kept at the top 8 cutoff there, because we have a battle for it between Sub-Zero Arc and Shaco. Shaco, who, as I mentioned before, week 2, when I was here around, has been a former teammate of mine, is a countrymate of mine as well. So no bias, but yeah, go Shaco, maybe. Let's see who wins on that 1v1 there. And, well, I mean, it's interesting because they're probably both in playoffs unless something completely insane happens. But of course, they really want to make the bye. Who knows? Maybe even both of them can get that bye for the last week, because there are plenty of more lobbies happening around at the same time as well. And anything else you feel you should add, just storyline-wise here?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, we have the Tide on the edge of playoffs, right? The Sub-Zero Arc and the Shaco, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. But then looking down a little bit toward the middle of the pack of the lobby that we have coming up in the overall standings, we have Kurt and the God EU West are both tied. Another tied matchup here they're both set in the middle. And as we know, like, everyone wants to be top 8. They want to skip week 1, but really you want to make playoffs, right? You don't want to be in those bottom that get cut. And if you're sitting in the middle of the pack, you're not safe, right? There's a lot of things that can happen. You know, you have a few inconsistent games. You don't quite understand maybe the patch, and you can drop down. But we have looking at Kurt and EU and the God EU West. I think that's going to be another battle that we can really pay attention to who can solidify that spot, because they're going to be taking points away from each other, right? So who can solidify their spot in that playoff contention, or maybe even push toward that top 8 with a couple really good games, and who is going to fall a little closer to that elimination and get a little bit more nervous going into games 3 and 4 later on tonight.
Talk about nerves. They can always play quite a factor here on players' development during the series. It's a game of 4. It's a night of 4 games in a row, and that's a lot to play, especially in a competitive setting, especially when so much might be at stake, maybe an elimination, maybe a qualification. But coming into that, we talk about the gameplay, and is there anything specific that you want to see, or that you're expecting to see when it comes to actually getting onto the board and building your team?
Yeah, I think as we kind of gotten through this patch a bit, we've seen a few other comps kind of emerge into relevancy. One of them that's been, I know it was going kind of crazy on the subreddit, is the reroll Vi comp, right? With the Punk Vi, or maybe even the Mosher Vi, that they could slot in as an alternative to that Jinx carry that actually might be a little better as the Punk option. But I think we'll probably see some players cheating toward the Vi potentially. And then another one that we've kind of seen gain a resurgence is Lulu. Lulu has been sort of a sleeper carry throughout this entire set, sometimes more viable than others. But right now, especially with the Twin Terror board, Lulu is a definitely a viable threat. And as we saw a few weeks ago, where if a player can get to a line that is a lot less contested, and maybe, you know, if you have Pentacle units, you're going to have 2 or 3 people in the lobby that are going to be wanting those Pentacle units also, right? But if you have a good setup for something like a Lulu or something like a Vi, that's going to be much less contested. You're going to be able to see much more consistent results. So I'm looking to see if these players can adapt to the more fringe comps and see if you can execute them at a level to get those really kind of free, uncontested points.
Adaptation is definitely going to be extremely important here, and for sure these players will be knowing how to do that. They are competitive players after all. There's a reason they are at the ACL, the most prestigious league that we have right here in Aegis. We are very shortly getting into game 1 of 4 of tonight. Excitement is at a high. And yeah, I agree with the comments that you were mentioning, that Vi has been so good. I've had the pleasure of casting a few TFT games down here in Brazil this week, and I saw a Vi reroll, very fun. Jax used to be the thing when it came to motions, now it's the Vi. The Lulu, very good as well. But as you mentioned, if you can get Twin Terror or maybe the hologram, something, so that you can have 2 Lulus in camp, and because of that, they will feed off each other with that hyper pop, just feeding the mana and jumping in. That's really fun. And as you mentioned, of course, Karthus is probably the most staple for cost, but there is also the Heart Steel, which is a very fun comp to me. I love Heart Steels. I love gold generation based synergies, and Heart Steel is the one that's sat around. And of course, if you can get it early, if you can focus down on it, you can easily transition into that Ezreal down the line, which is probably the second best forecast cost carry that you have in the game. And I think you have a lot of variation when it comes to frontline. So you can have Viego, Akali, you can have Breezers, you can have Guardians, you can have so many choices. But when it comes to backline, I would say it's pretty much Karthus and Ezreal nowadays.
Yeah, Karthus and Ezreal, definitely your premier carries for the forecast. We've seen things like Disco kind of fall off a bit. They just kind of, TF is just not really able to keep up with the damage output of the Akali, the Karthus, the Ezreal. So the forecasts are kind of in flex. We have seen, again, a little bit more 2-cost carry coming in. The Kayle is definitely a route you can go. Again, as I talked about earlier, if you're signing up to play Kayle, you're signing up to be contested by a lot of people, especially for someone playing Edgelord, maybe Yone or Riven, that they want those Kayles. If you're playing Pentakill, you might be running a Kayle in the meantime before you upgrade it to a Yorick or something like that. So it's definitely a hotly contested comp, but it's one of those that if you high roll into it early, maybe you get your Edgelord chosen, maybe you have a couple of extra on your bench. It's something that you can look to really streak out through that stage 3 and kind of push those 4-cost players down into the a deeper pit of HP to sort of beat them out value-wise going into stage 4 and get in stage 5. So there are a few options there. Some of the comps that we've seen kind of fall off a bit. Stuff like you mentioned the Jax. Jax kind of seems a lot less powerful than normal. I know I had a game the other day where I high rolled the biggest high roll of my life into a Jax. Like I had like a chosen Jax 3 EDM on something like 3-5 and just bled out the entire game. He just couldn't keep up with the damage. I kind of feel the same thing about Katarina. Katarina has kind of been in and out of the meta for a while, that Crowd Diver Katarina setup that can do a lot of backline damage, but it just struggles so hard with these really, really strong front lines that it just struggles to kind of chew through them to get to those backlines. So if you high roll into these, we could see them coming out today, but I would be shocked if we see anyone really hunting for those kind of units.
I would agree on the Jax being so hard to pull it off nowadays. You're probably going to bleed out, as you said, but it's probably just a good holder for some other units. Then eventually you transition to something else. The KO, I love it as well, but as you mentioned, very much contested. The Katarina, under the right circumstances, if you can get into the very late game with 6 Crowd Divers, maybe it's something, but still hard to pull off a top 1 as well. And now, as we finally are into the game 1, it's time for our Galaxy, our portal, and it's the item payout as selected by Shaco. We start off on Sub-Zero Arc, one of our 2 players fighting off for that top 8 spot right now, tied along with Shaco with 60 points both. So every time a player completes an item, they are gonna get a little buff of income, which is very nice nowadays, I would say, since income has become a bit harder to achieve.
Yeah, with the kind of rework of how Street Gold works, and here we have a Vi offer right now. Definitely the monster variant not the preferred of the two, I think, but it's still a very strong option if you want it. But like you said, with the street gold kind of knocked down a lot, any sort of gold generation that you can get from non-augments is really, really powerful. So this is going to definitely reward people being very decisive and slamming very just good flexible items. A lot of frontline items will be very good to slam. A lot of things like a Rage Blade maybe is a pretty safe slam, can go in a few comps very easily. It is committing to that Vi there. Does have potentially the Jinx and the Vi on the bench, but really no components for the Vi. Like a Giant Slayer can work well on Vi, but it's definitely not your best in slot. So we'll see if they end up committing to that. If they buy the Jinx too, I have a feeling they might kind of commit to that line for a while. But Sub-Zero Arc, like you said, kind of on the line here where they need to make something happen and make something, just want to be consistent today. If they're consistent, they'll make playoffs. And something like a one cost reroll that's strong right now is pretty much the definition of consistent.
Now we're going on to the first augment of the game of tonight, and it's a silver one, so things aren't going to go too crazy. And Iron Assets, I think, would be so good here, getting that extra bit of income, getting an extra component as well, maybe being able to build some items, getting some decent decision early on whether they're going for that Vi or that Jinx. Does have the last resort to build on the Jinx, but still of course has to decide whether the Jinx or the Vi is going to be the focus of their comp. And no, we are not going with the Iron Assets. We are actually going with a component buffet. Is it? Yeah,
component buffet gives you a lot more flexibility, but again, this is not something in this galaxy that you necessarily want to hang on to, being as slamming items gives you value, right? We did see a couple players level up to 4. Most of them, I believe, stayed at 3, so we will have to check around in a little bit and see where we're at. But Heartsteel, you talked about Heartsteel. Survivor, you like Heartsteel. We've got a Heartsteel start here from Pitsy. The Rage Blade is slammed on the Jinx, so a lot of power coming out from Sub-Zero Arc's board, trying to get that win streak gold throughout stage 2.
Trying to get a win streak gold, and certainly making himself stronger in order to do so. The TG on the Vi builds himself 2 items, gets 4 gold. Of course, isn't able to make it to 10 yet because he decided to level, decided to build a lot. As you mentioned, Pitsy going with a hot steal. I love to see it. And Pitsy, of course, the player who absolutely never made less than 20 points in any week. So truly smashing. Truly, there is a reason he's top 1 right now in our league. And of course, if there is someone who really knows how to play flexible out of a income start, it is them. But now we see King's board here, who is, by the way, subbing in for the Geo, and I feel there is a storyline to tell about that sub specifically.
Yeah, so King's coming in. The Geo has had, a little bit of a rough time, is sitting in that spot where they are kind of on the edge of making playoffs or not making playoffs. So Geo has really put their fate for the continuing on in the ACL in Keynes' hands, right? Keynes is going to have some pretty good performances today to get them into that playoff spot. But we know from being around the ACL as long as we have, if you're going to put your fate in someone's hands, Keynes is a great option, right? Keynes is a very strong player, and I'm sure that they'll have good results today as we're hopping on board now with Pitsy, checking out that Heartsteel.
Heartsteel with that blue buff slam and the Sunfire cape as well. The Sunfire, obviously one of maybe the most early game stable item there is. And then the blue buff, who is surely going to end up on an Ezreal down the line, which is the most very flexible play to go for. Got himself some extra components because of the buried treasures, which meant a bit of extra income. It has even the ability to pre-level and still be above 10 gold, which is giga here because maybe not all players are able to afford it. And we see Shaco, one of the players, the Olaf facing off against Sub-Zero for that top 8 spot, playing this Olaf right now with no headliner, by the way. So if he does end up finding a headliner, Olaf could potentially just go for the reroll.
Yeah, Olaf is another one of those comps that has kind of fallen out of favor. It's definitely something that you can high roll into and look for a top 4 with, but it's really struggles in those, especially with the Ezreal comp, when you have an Ezreal just blinking away from the Olaf constantly and he just running around doing nothing. why he's getting pounded by the Ezreal. But definitely looking at Pitsy's board, you pointed it out perfectly that blue buff is absolutely going on Ezreal. And this is one of those things that in these lobbies, when these players are playing at such a high level and they're doing a lot of scouting, right? It's easy in solo queue to get lazy and not scout and all that stuff. But as players are scouting around the lobby, they see Pitsy has slammed a blue buff. They're going to instantly be thinking, okay, they're going for Ezreal. So we need to plan to either go somewhere else or we're just going to handshake and agree to contest them. But we're jumping on board here with Nazrat or Tarzan, whatever you want to call him, does have that Heartsteel Cassante as well, but is not able to find that Heartsteel unit fast enough, and I think makes a great choice and sells it, but then it instantly sees a set. So, but 5 KDA is definitely nothing to scoff at here this early in the game.
Interesting choice. He suddenly decides to make a role, sacrifices economy, but guarantees himself a massively great headliner here with his Kai'Sa, so gets access to that 5 KDA. Kai'Sa great to cost as well after the buffs. And of course, wants to keep that win streak going. Has 3 already, has a big potential to go to 5 and be the only player making it to the Krugs at 100 HP. It's an interesting choice, I would say, because of course it's always very risky to sacrifice economy, especially when you're doing so to go under 10 gold so early into the game. But apparently the risk paid off.
Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely a risk. I mean, anytime that you are, messing up your econ to guarantee that streak, you're betting that if I 6 streak, I'm going to make up that 1 gold that I lost, right? And if you 7 or 8 streak, you're just compounding on that and making up that ground that you lost. I don't think that Tarzan is in much danger here because their board does seem very strong. Does have a 1-star front line, but other than that is a very strong board. But if they lose here and lose that ability to 6 streak, then it's going to be a much, much harder game for them to play through. But I like the kind of risky strategy.
Does also have a combat augment, which Embrace It, for example, here does not. That adds it to the great possibility of his board just managing that Evelynn. The Evelynn, of course, even if they were a bunch of 1-stars at the front line, she lost a lot of time there, and so the Kai'Sa did the work, even if it's a 1-unit win, still exactly what he needed. So keeps the win streak going. He's going to be at 100 HP on fire going onto Greg, so very good result for him so far. We see Pitsy already with a KO too. Interesting. KO, as we mentioned before, I believe, honestly, probably the best 2-cost item holder nowadays. So flexible, can hold mana items, can hold attack speed items.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would say that between Kale and Kai'Sa, those are definitely the premier ones. Kale does have that added benefit of potentially being able to be your carry. But they're both very, very strong item holders, and if they haven't fought each other yet, and Tarzan just getting the gold start, so able to potentially 6 streak here with 30 gold, that's going to be an insane economy advantage if they manage to win the next couple rounds. We'll see what happens there. I'm sure we're going to check around the board in a little bit, but they're a front line away from having a very, very, very powerful board as we're jumping on board here with Kurt.
Wow, if only that was a crowd Diver Katarina, then you could pair it up with a Zed as well. But nonetheless, we still have an upgrade to the Nami here for Kurt Angle, the Shojin, so a lot of CC is going to coming up, and that Zed, of course, very flexible. You probably really love to have a Zed in the end game anyways. Pair that up with a Zac, have 2 EDM, it's a flexible unit. The Zac does a little bit, the Zed, does a bit decent of damage, and then of course whatever unit you have paired up with him, like a Kurt, not a Kurt Angle, a Kardos or a Israel, both of them would be really good. So it's a nice drop anyways, and of course it's going to do a lot of work for them at this stage.
Yeah, that Annie just not enough, especially without a Chosen. Is just not enough to hold back that board. Nami is such a great and undervalued 1-cost unit. Being able to hold, again, any attack speed and mana items or AP items works so great on the Nami. Has a lot of CC and damage. But we do see a couple people sitting at the top of the standings. Tarzan up there and in that 100 streak, and then a prismatic Sir Black P things are about to accelerate very fast.
Very fast indeed, and it's gonna be fun. We're starting off things very spicy. We have binary here. We're gonna have 2 extra items coming onto the board, full cuts angle as well now. Oh, very excited to see what else the other players are going to be finding. Sub-Zero, one of our players fighting for that top 8, just found himself a Mordekaiser too. A 3-cost unit at 2-star level this early into the game. That's going to be one hell of a powerful frontline for Sub-Zero.
Yeah, and we see a lot of players hitting level 6, a few of them hitting upgrades. This 3-2, kind of the level 6 mark. 3-1 or 3-2 is when you want to be making that jump for tempo reasons. But if you're Kurt, I mean, sitting at 50 gold, level 6 here, you've got a pretty strong board. This Gnar 2 is a very powerful unit. The fully itemized with the binary airdrop. Nami is going to be adding so much damage and so much CC. And this Olaf without any sort of CC, no metalheads, no QSS or anything like that, is going to get kind of gunned down pretty fast. So a good win here from Kurt Angle. Is not streaking very hard. You know, took a loss in the stage 2, so isn't able to push that streak advantage, but still in a very, very powerful spot. A lot of these players have not committed to an angle yet, so there's a lot of flexibility left in this game. You don't see a lot of people hard forcing anything. We do see, looking at Sub-Zero's board, we do see the Dazzler Bard with the Misfortune. Misfortune definitely a unit that's come back into the meta as of late as a good carry with that Jazz board. So we could see that, but sitting at 30 gold, a little bit less economy advantage, but 4 streaking with the Mordekaiser 2 with the TG, Cybernetic Bolt. There's a lot of good things happening with this board.
With a Rage Blade and IE Slammed, I feel still very flexible. Could go for those 4 costs, but of course, going for that MF board would feel good here as well. There is very decent choice that they do. If they can streak, go to 50 and then start rolling above 50, then there is a very good chance to just keep playing for that MF plus Bard. I feel Bard as your headliner is a bit better as well, because then he gets access to that extra dudes being played around. MF is going to be really good even if she's not your headliner. And I agree, coming back into the meta a little bit, there are some mats coming around saying that Kai'Sa might be a bit better overall, but after 15 seconds of fight, if you can have a board strong enough to get that, then that MF is really powerful, and getting those big buffs from the extras stats that the Jazz is going to give you and your whole team makes a big difference into making that MF really powerful, that extra AD to her name.
Yeah, and something that everyone's going to be looking at as soon as this 3-4 carousel comes around, a Karthus with a tier, right? Pentakill, Karthus especially being one of the best comps in the game, if not the best comp in the game. With a tier on it, definitely gives some direction to some players that might want to pick that up. But we're going to jump over here with Shaco, who took the Determined Investor. This is a really interesting augment that has a lot of flexibility in it. I love this item, especially if you're planning on to me, the premier way of using this is having it on a Mumu, right? So a Mumu is a champion that kind of ramps up, that gives a lot of a huge, burst of CC with their ultimate once they have built up to that 3rd cast. Determined Investor is an item that almost guarantees that a Mumu to get their ult off, which is very, very powerful. We'll see how Shaco wants to use it, but a very good item that doesn't only give you utility, but also generates some gold.
And generating some gold, always very important, no doubt. We see the face-off between Shaco and Sub-Zero, the 2 players who are direct rivals in this final week, and let's see whether that Sub-Zero board is going to be able to manage the big Olaf coming into the face of the boss. There is a lot of healing, there is still an Edge of Noise to proc as well, but look at the power of that MF combined with the armor shred coming in, but the Kai'Sa is going to finish the job. Sub-Zero loses their win streak, 93, and that's a very important win for Shaco specifically, because as I mentioned, Sub-Zero is the one Shaco wants to take down. Of course, there is a chance that both of them make it into the top 8, but if only one can do it, then they are gonna need to take the other one down.
Yeah, and a big win there. I was worried about the Mordekaiser 2 being just a little bit too much for this board from Shaco to chew through, but a very, very well played board. It's kind of fit in a lot of seemingly random units, right? Just to get a few other buffs on their units, and that Kaisa doing so much work. As we see Keen's another determined investor, another Kaisa chosen, a lot of similarities on this board, but this Olaf 3 is going to be so hard for Keen's to deal with. It's going to be pretty tough. Keen's also has that blue buff and red buff slam, something else that you would expect to go towards something like an Ezreal, right? Or even potentially, we could see that on like an Ahri / Akali, as you've seen kind of that go around, where Akali's a great red buff holder, where Ahri's a great blue buff holder. So a little flexibility there, but when you slam those items, it does limit you to just a couple comps. Keen does take an okay loss there. It gets 70 of 80 stacks on the Heartsteel. Not a huge cash out, but we'll see if they want to keep going. Does take the cash out, hits the Yone too. So a bit of a potential direction here. Yone may be an option here, but with the blue buff and red buff items made, I don't really see a direction for it right now.
Pushing to level 8 on the very next round, I'm assuming, trying to get that edge over the competition and already finding his headliner before everybody else. Going for that Ezreal, no doubt, the Heartsteel board here. Ahri and fighters, I think it's a very good comp. I love it. Ahri Akali, Ahri Diego, or even Zed, or whoever you can find, even the Poppy, massive frontline. But Ezreal here is just going to be so good. The thing is, finding the exact headliner you want tends to be a bit harder nowadays. So he's obviously skipping all the ones that he's finding. There's only one that is desired. It is the Ezreal. The thing is, it doesn't look like it's going to be happening anytime soon.
That is really, really hard, Black P, because I mean, there was a few really good options there. You have the Caitlyn potentially as a holder while you're looking for your Ezreal. You had the Pentakill Viego. That's a great, just a powerful unit, even with suboptimal items, could build you back some econ. But Keen's makes the decision to go ahead and commit to that misfortune and really just probably build back some econ as they're kind of looking for those Ezreals. Sadly, I think we're going to see a lot of players kind of starting to hit that level 8 mark right now, because we've seen a lot of item slams that have given a lot of economy, which has pushed the level tempo a bit. So I think that Keen's is just kind of praying that they aren't going to find those Ezreal chosen, so that maybe they can look around for it. And another prismatic. So we're silver, prismatic, and Keen's has already rolled over golden ticket, so I don't really want to talk about it anymore, honestly.
One more prismatic for everybody here. That power up to the board, sells the MF, tries once again to roll for the headliner, gets those 2 support items. Honestly, I don't feel so happy about those support items right now. I do not
feel good right now, Black P. I do not feel good about this.
Randomings and Zephyr. I mean, rough to position around. Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing, rough to position around.
Yeah, you always hate when you get those 2 items that kind of don't work that well together, so the Zephyr is going to be able to hit something in the backline, or maybe a second line unit. We'll probably hit the Echo here, I believe, but just not able to find a chosen. Does have the Akali potentially if they want to lock for it, but it seems like Keen's is saying it's Ezreal or nothing, baby. That's what it feels like they're going for. And it's risky, but if they do manage to hit the Ezreal pretty soon, it will pay off. It'll be a very powerful option with the blue buff, red buff, i.e. very powerful Ezreal items, but you got to hit it to play it.
You got to hit it to play it, and remember, there was Pizzi going down that line as well, so you got to wonder whether maybe Pizzi hit it, or even if Pizzi is also still trying to find it. Now we transition onto Tarzan's board, which was our opposite boards on the previous fight, going for this Seraphine, only 2 away from hitting it. I like this exit. We saw a come-up-ons of that comp on the patch when Shojin becomes so strong and you didn't really have that access to level 7 and 8. Going for the Seraphine as your carry, as an exit of that 2-cost reroll, and feels really good, and still a very good comp. And that Echo with a Radiant Declaw is going to be very, very tanky.
Yeah, absolutely. And Seraphine, as you see, does have the Morello slammed on it. We've talked about this in the past, but anti-heal is so important in the current meta, with so much healing, not only in traits, not only in items, but in augments as well. Harm Assist being one of the best augments in the game right now. So the Seraphine, able to apply Morello so well, is able to kind of stop that from happening a kind of a hit there from Tarzan, not a bad one, but if they manage to hit this Seraphine 3 after Carousel here, could really set them up with a really good direction going into the second half of stage 4. We'll see if they're able to hit it, but they're in definitely a good spot if they can just get that Seraphine 3 rolling.
We also saw Pizz's board playing around a KO and a headliner True Damage Akali, so answered my previous question about whether had he hit or not the Ezreal as well. So looks like the entirety of this lobby has not been finding Ezreals, so there is a chance both Pizzi and Kings still find theirs. But for now, we see the power that KO provided. Even the blue buff, who is now not as optimal as it used to be since her mana pool has increased so much, still really good. The Akali doing a decent job as well. The difference of picking up a headliner, whatever you want, whichever one, just to make yourself stronger now instead of praying for the best one. And talking about praying, Nazra doesn't have to pray anymore, finds the Seraphine.
Yeah, has that Seraphine 3, so a big power spike there. Lulu 2 is definitely nothing to shake a stick at, but the Echo now with the Ionic Spark, just adding a little more magic damage shred to allow this Seraphine to do even more damage. I mean, Nazra is setting up in a very good position as we look across for Sub-Zero Arc, who still has that Bard chosen with the adaptive helm to give that mana generation, and that Misfortune now with the Lucian to give the extra jazz. But this Seraphine is just pumping out so much damage, and this Echo still hasn't died. So Echo managed to tank so much from Sub-Zero Arc's board there and just let Seraphine just rain down damage across his board, as we're hopping over now to check out Sub-Zero Arc.
Big hit on the Lucian, and especially getting the Tactician's Crown as well. You know, well, not actually Tactician's Crown, but the same effect. You have the ability to put it onto the board and up yourself with that extra jazz, but still, so far away from the board and the MF, it feels bad to be in this position right now.
Yeah, it does have the duper if they want to really commit. I would imagine that the Bard will most likely get sold. The Dazzler is not exactly what you want there. It does give you kind of a free proc of the jazz, right? But really is kind of, you want that jazz either on the Bard or on the Misfortune. So we could see a roll down here on 5-1 where you sell the Bard and then look for that Misfortune chosen, or at least a Bard chosen with jazz. So I wouldn't be surprised, but we do have an Ezreal player. Pitsy, we saw him with a KO last time, but now does have that Ezreal. So a much more powerful board, but not able to deal with this jazz setup from Sub-Zero Arc.
Took a while for Pitsy to find his desired headliner, but finally was able to. Wondering whether Kings was able to, because those two players were trying for the same thing. I like this board by Sub-Zero Arc, has been rising so much in power. I saw some players, as I mentioned, I was casting some TFT previously this week, and I saw so much of a rising of this comp. I don't feel it's a top 1 comp most of the time, but it can be very solid for a top 4. But of course, the fact that we are so far away from the board and the MF here is a bit rough. The spatula kinda weird here, especially since you don't have the jazz spatula anymore as well.
Yeah, Jazz Spat is not in the game anymore. As you see, the cloak there would have been an instant take for Sub-Zero Arc. But what that does give you is if you're playing this Jazz line, it does allow you to get another trait in, to sort of push the Jazz damage further, right? So you could get something in like KDA already had KDA, but you could get something in that you might not have been able to fit in beforehand to get an extra Jazz proc. But looking across this board, Katarina 3, Yone 3, this looks like a tough matchup, but I don't expect this Jazz will have much trouble getting through it.
Let's see the Yone getting access here to the backline, very close to killing the MF. The Bard is getting deleted. The daggers from the Arena did a massive job, and Embrace It is gonna survive, making Sub-Zero embrace the loss.
I'm gonna go ahead and take credit for that one. That's my bad. I cursed that one for sure. As we're looking over here with Kurt's board, does have that pentakill chosen Karthus, so is it 7 pentakill, missing a bunch of upgrades. I mean, they're missing an Akali 2, they're missing a Viego 2, they're missing a Mordekaiser 2. So a lot of really powerful upgrades here that I'm sure that Kurt wants to get to make this board stable. And to me, looking at this board, the way this comp works as powerfully as it does is utilizing that Viego's ultimate. So Karthus, as you know, will target units based on their missing HP. So Karthus on its own is not that much of a threat to backline units out of the gate. But what Viego does is using that ultimate as a frontliner to damage, just kind of touch those backline units a bit to allow Karthus to target them. But until Viego is 2-star, doing that consistently is very difficult because you can't really frontline the Viego like you would want to. There, obviously, Kurt had a great win there over Sub-Zero Arc, but I would love to see that Viego upgrade. I'm sure Kurt would like to see it much more than myself, but that Viego upgrade is whenever this comp kind of pushes itself over the line from good to great.
Thankfully for them right now, it was enough to survive against Sub-Zero's board and keeping themselves alive for one more round at 11 HP. We see here PT flexing around a bit, selling some frontliners, changing around into the Poppy. Ezreal with very good items, a very good board all around, but and 2 Poppies, by the way, in the front line. Question is this going to be enough for them to survive at 18 HP? It looks like they have been taking some losses recently. Now they're going to be facing off against the Seraphine Ghost. Yeah. Now Ghost playing around because we only have 7 players into the game.
Yes, does have a Ghost, so I'm sure that Pitsy is pretty happy to see a Ghost there. The Poppy itemization is pretty crazy. I imagine that Poppy is probably going to get sold at some point. But Poppy is such an insanely good value frontliner. Doesn't need really any traits for her to kind of do her job as just not dying, right? So I like the idea of if you need frontline, Poppy is a great option to do so. So Pitsy does live there. We do have a lot of spats on this carousel: Edgelord, Punk, Emo, and 8-Bit. I wonder if we'll see anyone go for these.
So many emblems for these players to pick up if they want. Pitsy goes right to the Emo there to combo with his Poppy. Interesting choice. We saw, by the way, that Cut Angle got eliminated in 7th place, so unfortunately Angle locked off getting into that top 4 on this game.
And Kurt, one of the players, again, that we talked about this in that middle of the pack that really needs to have consistent performances here to get themselves securely into playoffs next week. So a 7th there is definitely going to hurt that chance. But again, 4 games tonight. We have a lot of time for people to kind of make it up. Pitsy rolling around, maybe looking for something, wants to upgrade that Ziggs for sure. Does have a little bit of a Jazz Splash here, and Jazz Splash is definitely good. But this Misfortune and Bard with no items are basically dead units at this point.
Look at the position, and on the opposite side, everyone around the dummy to proc a bit on that randomings, and the Zephyr, of course, didn't matter that much. Let's see whether that Ezreal can survive the big Poppy. The red buff is good, but they wasn't able to cut enough of a healing. The Emo Ziggs plus the Sniper Ezreal are insane, and PT survives for one more fight. Kings took a loss, down to 16 HP. Shaco at 21. 3 players fighting for that top 4, with Supernatural there being eliminated.
Yeah, so we're down to our top 5. We'll see if Pitsy can keep that streak going in those top 4. But looking over here at Shaco has a lot of gold. Probably just guessing, probably some of the most gold in the game right now. Does have that Edgelord Akali, which is absolutely fantastic. The Karthus set up, so we have a couple players that are playing toward this line. Does have the pentakill chosen. I love that these players are able to make these item determinations, because if you're just going off of guides, like if you're just looking at mobalytics or tactics tools or whatever you might look, some of these items are not going to be what you want to slam. But these players are able to weigh the options of having, optimal items or having immediate power, and I really like the determination that Shaco has made here.
Determination, playing with the 10 investors, and that's a very close fight, but the Viego is smashing in the front line. The Bloodthirster with the Edge of Night was able to keep him alive for long. Now the Karthus remains alone against the Zed, and unfortunately isn't enough to deal with it. So Kings gets the win. Shaco goes down to 12 HP, and it's the closest player in risk of elimination. The thing is, very greedy play right now with 50 gold, obviously making himself above economy in order to make that push for level 9, which is going to happen after the PV comes around. The question is that enough? Is the level 9 going to be any difference? Which unit can be put in here to actually make this into a top 4 board?
Yeah, it's tough because obviously he has the Echo on the bench, so he's able to slot that in for Sentinels, able to slot that in for true damage with the Akali, so it does like get a little more power. But you know, it's a hard sell to say like, would it have been just more powerful to you know, roll down and upgrade these units? So we'll see what they end up doing. Does have a lot of options here. Is going to go with that Kale to go back to Pentakill 7, which is not shocking to me. Has a few options. Goes with the TG. I really like that idea. Just the immediate power here instead of going for any best in slots. The Viego items though are looking really good. I think that this board is sort of an Akali 2, Yorick 2 away from being very powerful. But with so little economy, we'll see if they're able to make it happen.
Very good upgrades indeed, and has the good luck of facing off against a Ghost, which sometimes tends to be a bit less powerful. We see the Viego going and smashing onto the backline safely, so the Cartus crits around and eliminates all the weak targets. But look at the Ahri, is able to delete the Viego. The Cartus is really trying one more, maybe can kill the Ahri, but there's going to still be an Echo. And the Ghost, because it was a Ghost, we still have 1 HP left on us. One more round, and so does Sub-Zero Arc. Both players who are contenders against each other with 1 HP.
That is crazy. Sub-Zero Arc does have that misfortune too now. It's still sitting on the Dazzler Bard, but a prayer from a Ghost for Shaco there to stay at that 1 HP mark and not go out at 5th here and keep their dreams of that top 8 spot alive. A great fight there. That Echo with that Radiant Declaw just refusing to take damage. We'll see who's going to hang on in this next round.
It's once again the Declaw Echo, but now it's against Sub-Zero. Can this Seraphine board once again do the job and destroy one of the top 8 contenders in the lobby? Look at the AoEs coming in. They are so destructible. The Jess units here are really trying, but they can't do much. That Declaw Echo is massive, and it is a smash from Nazareth onto Sub-Zero. He gets eliminated. Shackle does as well, but look at the HP bars. Sub-Zero Harvey Ross by 2 HP by 1 unit difference, and because of that, Shaco is the top 4 of our game and starts off in the lead in his 1v1 against Sub-Zero tonight.
Shaco making a great statement for Brazil TFT. I know you're excited about that, Blackbeard. That what an incredible play there. You couldn't have get the storyline between the two of them, both fighting, tied for points, looking for that top 8 spot, and Shaco slams the door on Sub-Zero Arc and says, I will take this top 4, but now we're looking to top 3. Nad Tarzan on fire, Keens and Pitsy very low, but that Seraphine is just doing so much work. Can it hold up against this Ezreal?
Really trying to, the Ezreal can jump around and maybe escape away from the Seraphine, but at the same time maybe he goes onto the clump and takes the AoE. Look at the Akali jumping around, did not go onto the Ezreal. Perfect positioning by Kings here, and the Zed plus Ariel do the job. Nazareth takes a loss. Kings and Pixie still surviving the round. Nazareth takes the loss and goes to 30, which means all 3 players still alive. Pixie level to 9 a few rounds ago, so all of those players are at level 9 and at massive boards. Once again, emblems on the carousel, but are there going to be any takers? Doesn't really look like it. People looking around for more interesting items.
Yeah, the emblems are just so hard to fit in at this point. Everyone kind of has their board, but a 200 cash out as well as getting that Lucian 2. The Radiant Edge Knight does have some reforges if they want to kind of look into maybe reforging some of those items. But this Keens is showing exactly why this Ezreal board is so powerful, right? It's just able to blink around, be disruptive in its targeting, kind of let units chase it from time to time, or just completely drop aggro and then do massive bursts of damage onto the backline. And the Seraphine just wasn't able to keep up. Is proccing that Randuin's to give it as much as possible, but now we have Ezreal v Ezreal. Let's see who can get it done.
fight for the elimination. PT versus Kings, one of them might go down just now. There is a Ziggs upgrade on the other side, and it's that 2-star emo Ziggs. But look at this radiant Adjunoid Zed just mashing around and killing everything with his shadows. Kings smashes the competitions, takes down PT, the #1 player overall on the standings. And now the top 2 is determined. Ezreal versus Kings, and Kings trying to pull it off for TGO.
Yeah, the Zac 2 definitely a good option here. Definitely a good upgrade. Does have the Alawi if they want to try and fit it in, but no, opts not to. There's really not a lot of upgrades that this board can have. You know, you have the option of potentially dropping some of the Heartsteel units to lessen yourself off of that. But again, it's providing you a lot of economy, but I don't think that this is going to last much more than 4 rounds. So we get 16 HP, 30 HP, on fire to not. Seraphine versus Ezreal. Who can get it done?
Seraphine has been doing a great job making it to this top 2, but it looks like this Ezreal Zed board might be unstoppable. Look at the set making it all to the way to the backline and applying that armor shred, who helps so hardly the Zed and the Ezreal do the damage. That means an easy fight for Kings, who takes the win. Now one more fight we're gonna have on the next round. It's gonna be all the way to stage 7-1 in this game, which is pretty crazy by itself, but it doesn't look like there's much chance for Nazareth. Kings just built himself so much.
Yeah, this random wins is giving so much extra resistance to these units, as well as the Zephyr not able to kind of, you know, play it like you would have in previous sets, but still gives enough disruption to make space for this Ezreal to go absolutely crazy. And Kings, I want to highlight this again. Kings subbing in for Geo this week. Geo on the edge of not making it to playoffs, and has definitely put their faith in the right player. Kings is playing out of their mind right now. We do see Tarzan hitting that Sona 2, is going to elect to go for the damage to try and spread out the damage a little bit. These fights are so short that I agree that the attack speed is not going to do as much here. So they're just trying to spread out damage a little bit, just to maybe finish off some units that Seraphine is hurt. We'll see if it can happen.
Let's see the Sona cast. Can it be a big one and destroy everything? The Zephyr was really good, ends up on the Echo, so takes out the main front line from the Seraphine comp. That Randuin's board and that defensiveness is too much to deal with. The Echo tanked for a little longer, but it wasn't nearly enough. King still with a massive statement win here, takes the top 1, trying to get that top 24 spot in the name of Geo. And by the way, the one other guy at the cutoff there at the edge in front of Kings or the Geo was exactly Tarzan. So it was a big win.
I mean, we couldn't have had a better show off there. We had Shaco, right? Yeah. We had Shaco and Sub-Zero Arc facing off, who are both on the edge of that playoff spot, that top 8 spot. And then we had Tarzan and Kings both fighting hard to make it into playoffs and not get eliminated after this week of play. And I love when we see the 2 players that have the most to prove come out swinging in game 1 and make a big statement. We've got a lot of really good games to look forward to tonight.
A solidified top 4 with both of the 2 confrontations that we had, the top 8 confrontation, the top 24 confrontation. We could not ask for a better storyline to start off the ACL here on week 4, on the last and decisive week of our most prestigious league. But now we go into a very short break, and then we come back for game 2.
Your lips are stained with fiction. You always have your reasons, and I spoil you rotten. Your hands are sealed in pockets. You fill them with your secrets. To you, I am nothing. I am. Your kiss, sweet like poison. You know you make me reckless. I'll run, but you are friction. Your touch feels like heaven. You make me hate all my sins. You are my religion. My religion. I have a million reasons to leave you, but I have a billion reasons to keep you. I have a million reasons to leave you, but I have a billion reasons to keep you.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, for game 2 of tonight's ACL, the decisive week. And Decker, we were talking just for a bit before we came online, and we couldn't have scripted it better, could we?
No, I mean it feels fake, right? Like we kind of track these storylines and we want to highlight these different kind of points of tension in these lobbies, and it couldn't have played out any better. I mean, we had both of our kind of matchups that are both fighting and positioning for the same spot, just be head to head against one another, right? So we Shaco and Sub-Zero Arc both positioning for that top 8 position, and then of course we had Keynes and we had Keynes and who I'm blanking. My Nazrat. Thank you, Tarzan. Just fighting for that playoff spot. I mean, this being the final week of play. There's so much on the line with these players. They're what they've worked for these entire weeks leading up to now. They could be out after today, so there's a lot on the line. And Keynes is definitely showing that they can step up. And Tarzan, they've had a kind of a rough tournament so far, but definitely showing that they are able to compete in these lobbies. And this is probably one of the most intense lobbies that we had today. So being able to take a statement second place in that lobby sets a tone for the rest of the day that I think that we're going to be seeing Tarzan in next week in the playoffs.
Oh, bold call. Let's see whether Tarzan makes it or not. It definitely was fun to see both those storylines coming together and those confrontations at the end there, but we cannot forget that in the middle of all of that, we had Pizzi getting once again another great result. The top 3 there being sitting well at the very top of the leaderboard. Still safe and sound, the top 1. He still has been smashing the competition amazingly. Knows how to be flexible, as we saw during that game. Took a while to find that Ezreal, but knew exactly how to manage his board until he did so. And so at least the top 3 results once again poised maybe to once again go for that 20-point mark on the 4th week and make it all 4 weeks the same.
That would be a huge accomplishment. I'm definitely not a ACL historian, but I know some of the people out there are, and I would love to know, if there have been other players that have amassed this level of consistency throughout the regular season of ACL as Pizzi has. I mean, this is a really decisive resume for what they've done so far, and I'm looking forward to watching them not only in this lobby but in going on into the week, the second half of the day, and then also into playoffs next week, as they assuredly will be in playoffs next week. Yeah. The question is, will they be in the top spot or not? They'd have to do a lot of work to not be, I think, in one of the top 8 spots. But it's definitely possible. You could have some low roll games, you could have some bad decisions, But I love that, when we were talking before the first game, we talked a lot about non-4 cross carries. We talked about Lulu. We talked about Kale. We didn't talk about Seraphine. Why did we miss Seraphine? And then Seraphine shows up huge, right? Seraphine able to do so well in that last game to the second place and only lost to a very powerful Ezreal board. So that's definitely a comp that we need to be looking for and shouting out a little more, because it's very powerful. It can stabilize very early, as 2 cost chosens often do.
Very good user of that. Morello applying that AoE anti-heal, as you mentioned, really good. Not only because, of course, anti-healing itself is very important, but also it's HP-based damage when, of course, at the very late parts of the game, most of the units have massive HP pulls. So that is a massive added bonus of damage onto the Seraphine, plus the Rabadon that comes off. That's super fun. And so she deals a nice AoE, and of course, she does heal her teammates as well, depending on whether she's casting. So that's a very added extra bit of very good added extra bit of support to the comp as well. Now we go on to our portal selection for game 2 of tonight, and I wonder whether PT can make as many points as I was wondering. I will be throughout the night checking out the score sheet, because there are 32 points who can be achieved in a 4-game night. And if he does make 25, then he makes it to 100. Would be cool to see that 3-digit number there at the top of the ladder. But I digress. We go on to the completed evil anvil. Not evil. I mean, it can be evil, but completed anvil for every single player, so everyone can get that extra bit of direction with a item for their carry or maybe their front line.
Yeah, and we have seen, for the first 2 games so far, we haven't seen a lot of those really high variance portals. And in these players at this level, they don't really like high variance portals, right? Because you want consistency in your game and to be able to control the RNG as much as possible. Completed out of Anvil, just another very low variance portal that can give you a little bit of direction. You're going to see probably a lot of frontline items taken off this just to give a little bit of early power, but not a lot of game shifting type decisions to make off of this completed item, which I think a lot of these players will prefer. As we're jumping on board here with Keens, again, our winner of the last game, a very, very strong player. There's a reason that they are kind of a mainstay of the ACL. Starting out with a Shojin, one of the best items in the game right now. Can go on so many different units. Go on Karthus, can go on Seraphine, can go on Ari, even Ezreal. A lot of flexibility in that if they want to slam it. And Corki, a very good early item holder. Not taking a Chosen yet, but does have a lot of time to kind of decide what direction they want to take their stage to.
Very good option on the KO as well, whether it's a item holder or a carry for you. But it's interesting how so many players will forego picking up a headliner wanting to get a very specific one, wanting to get a very strong one, and not settling for a which they consider an optimal one. Oh my, we have Twin Terror as an option here on 2-1. It's Kurt Angle's board. Will he go for it and smash everyone with doubles on his board? That would be fun. That would be fun to see. Twin Terror is, of course, a staple, has so many options to go for. And yes, we have. And Twin Terror Punk, by the way, is an option as well.
Yeah, so Twin Terrors, there's a few ways you can play Twin Terrors, right? You can play it in probably what most people know as the Twitch Vex line, which is a very, very common Twin Terrors. But there's been a lot of other kind of Twin Terror options that are, you can play depending on your item setup. Another one we talked about is Lulu, another very good Twin Terror option. Or you can play more toward the Executioner style with something like Samira, and also with the Twitch. Does elect to slam the Ginsus and the Giant Slayer onto this Jinx. A Jinx 2 with Twin Terrors and another Jinx is going to be a very, very hard unit to get down, and can really, really cement Kurt's ability to win streak through stage 2 and start to go into that 6-7 streaks with those bonus golds that we talked about, last game.
Now we see golden ticket for Sub-Zero, deciding to go for some rolls there. For now, we see the 4 players who have managed to get their first win. Interesting to see the Jinx variation. I saw, well, as you mentioned, there are plenty of others. Even the Olaf KO has been a choice, I think would be a bit better than Olaf by himself without this augment, but it seemed to be going for the Jinx Vi here, and I think it's a good option because, of course, we already started off with 5 Jinxes and 5 Vi's. So I'm assuming for now it looks like RNG is being in our favor here.
Yeah, absolutely. So hitting a lot of those punk units. It will be interesting to see if they will eventually switch those items over to a Twitch. But wow, Pitsy with another Jinx chosen, able to kind of stop Kurt's idea. Kurt looking like they had a really good shot at a win streak here. You know, the difference is though that, you know, with Kurt staying on level 3, you're kind of accepting that win streaking might not be in the cards for you, because you'll see a lot of players pushing 4, and then even later into stage 2 pushing 5. So we will see what they kind of do in that situation. But jumping on with Tarzan here, a red buff. We see red buff slam a lot, Sir Black P. When you see red buff slam, we think Ezreal, right? We think that's the direction we're going. Tarzan might just want to run back to that Ezreal, which is definitely, hey, it's not going to be a bad decision, but we'll see if they're able to get that heart steal in and start generating some economy.
Only 1 away from getting the heart steal. A bit unlucky, I would say, because not getting a single Cassante, which is a 1 cost. But anyways, red buff means Ezreal most of the time. I do agree. Though, to be fair, a Akali, a Viego can be good users of the item as well if you do so choose to go down the pentakill / Cardos kind of line. But yeah, playing Heartsteel, having Metabolic Accelerator, all of it screams an Ezreal kind of play. I would like to go back a bit on what we saw on PT's boards, playing that Jinx with the Rage Blade and the Shiv. I don't think you slam Shiv almost ever nowadays, but PT says, I don't care. Right now, that's going to give me the most power. That's going to give me an edge against the entirety of the game or of the other players. And that's what I want. So, I mean, there is a reason this guy is the top 1 right now.
Yeah, Pitsy playing, again, just to hold on to that top 1 spot. All you need is consistency, right? You just need some form of consistent top 4 play, and a good way to do that, as we've spoken about a lot, it's just maintaining good HP, maintaining good economy, and then even if you bleed out in the stage, you know, the end of stage 4, end of stage 5, you're still looking at a top 5, top 4 situation if you play, you know, like Pitsy does it and play that super consistent lines. So, like, I think that's a great point out here. But this Jinx is going to be able to offer so much power. The 3 rapid fire, a little redundant, but the TG on not the best items for Aphelios, but a Thresh is definitely not what you think you're going to be playing against on stage 2-5 here. So we'll see if Pitsy, I doubt that they're able to, not really able to get through that, as Tarzan with a really early Thresh there gives a lot of power to their board to keep pushing them in that 100 HP, streaking into the end of stage 2.
Insane board by Tarzan, who took the metabolic, so I mean, wasting an augment kind of, which might feel bad, maybe not, because, you know, hitting a trash early, being that powerful, feels good as well. And we see Pitsy got himself this light of hand, so everything focused on getting early power. But unfortunately, it just didn't work out. You know, lost in 2-3, lost in 2-5 as well. Who gets one more combat here against Shaco, who's playing that maybe premier 1 cost headliner, which is the Colkey there in the back, and very poised to get this win. Has 2 types of anti-healing, the Morello and Colkey's innate ability as well. So Pitsy is going to take the loss, even took an item out and the headliner as well to make himself some economy and guarantee the continuance of his lose streak.
Yeah, I do love that decision from Pitsy, because you know that your board is not very strong relative to what we've seen around the lobby, and making 30 there is way more important than winning that round. Especially now you've got, since we have Heartsteel, losing is even, you know, more beneficial. So I love the idea just to make 30 there, make sure your economy is in a good spot. Does end up going for the country headliner Katarina. That is an interesting decision to me, and I'm not sure if he's angling just for power out of that unit. You know, a 2-star headliner or a 2-cost headliner is definitely going to give you a lot of power, but unless you can really activate Country to get that Hecarim out there, it's not going to be super ideal. But I mean, Pitsy is the player that they are because of the way they play. So it's not me. I shouldn't be doubting them, but it's an interesting decision for me.
I agree. Very interesting decision and fun to see what's going to come out of it. The Shiv, of course, going to go in the Kai Arena, but it's not going to be a unit all the way through. I'm assuming, then again, who knows? It's Pitsy, so maybe he pulls off something crazy. Kurt Angle just hit Jinx 3, so we have a bad Jinx there. Who is going to spawn off a secondary Jinx at 2 stars? Angling for a big comp right now.
Yeah, Jinx, again, Jinx Chosen is not necessarily what you expect to see when we see that Twin Terror comp, but it's definitely a strong unit and will give a lot of early game power and definitely makes the board. If you're playing that Twin Terror line, you can easily go into it from the Jinx, or you could just hold Jinx and have 2 Jinxes. There's nothing wrong with that by any means. But we'll look over here at Kurt's board, see how the 2-star Jinx is going. But we have a silver augment. This was double prismatic last game, so maybe a little bit of a good thing for these players to see the a little bit of the lack of a double prismatic, little lack of variance. But 11 gold on level 5 here did hit the Jinx streak, but has sacrificed a lot of economy for it. We'll see if they can build that win streak up to start to make that worth it, the investment.
Looks like a strong board right now. I like the choice with the Rage Blade as well. Nowadays, you would see, the mats saying it's not the most cool item for Jinx, but considering you might not have access to rapid fire for a while because of the way you need to run these units in the vault, feels good. Getting some attack speed there, and of course, you get what you get. You need to play something because you can't afford too much right now. Has those extra healing orbs at least, so that's a lot more board power, and he's able to slot in the 2 Vi's too. But I mean, yeah, I'm a bit away from the Vi and losing a lot of economy, so it's still a chance that this turns out very well for them, but really gotta hope those Vi start coming.
Yeah, we'll see if they sell the Twitch. I doubt that they would sell the Twitch to make 20 here, just because this is such an important unit in this comp. Does do it, so I actually don't hate that decision. But looking over here on Keen's with that IE, with that tier, has a tier on Cassante. We see 2 tiers, we see an IE. What do we think? We think Ezreal, right? So as we saw last game, Kale, as you pointed out in the last game, that Kale is so flexible with the items that they can hold and be effective. And this is another great example of this, as we saw, I believe it was Pitsy last game, play the Kale into the Ezreal, right? And I think we're seeing teams kind of angling that same direction. We'll see if they can keep that streak going against Kurt here. That 3-star Jinx is going to be really tough to deal with.
Would be really big for Kings to get this win, because it would mean getting access to that 50 gold and a bit extra interest. And because of so many items and the Cyberbook, it looks like his board might stand a bit of a chance, but the Jinx was able to stack the Rage Blade, and so Kurt Angle takes down Kings, and he's not able to make to 50. Tarzan is still fighting. Is the one at 100 HP on fire? Is the fire gonna be put out? Yes, Tarzan takes the loss, goes down to 95. Nobody at 100 HP anymore. Oh, by the way, there's an Ezreal on the carousel.
Yeah, and I'm sure this Ezreal will be very, very hotly contested, as we see. Not only do we see some people, edging toward the Ezreal, but we also will probably see people try and deny that Ezreal, or maybe we don't. So it looks like, is the Ezreal going to go untaken here? Because I believe that Tarzan has the Jinx. Shaco, I do not remember what Shaco was positioning towards, but does end up taking the Ezreal there. We'll see if Shaco wants to play this unit or not. But I'm surprised that I know that obviously everyone wants a chosen Ezreal, but even just the Ezreal 1 gives a lot of power early on. It also gives you an ability to kind of slam your items without thinking too much, But this board from Keen's is definitely looking powerful. A lot of beefy frontliners, the Gragas 2, the Tom Kench 2, the Cassante 2, and spreading out that cybernetic bulk very well, making sure that all of their frontline units have an item on it just to give them that extra bit of HP to give room for Kale to kind of do its damage.
Interesting. I would be betting. If I was a betting man, I would say Kings would take that Ezreal, go to the blue buff, which was like just so obvious to get there. And the IE as well would be very well built for the Ezreal. Of course, what you really want is a headliner Ezreal down the line, but I mean, you take what you can right now, it could be, but now he prefers to go with the KO, take an extra frontline item since he already has 2 completed for his backline carry. Interesting decision. Is a board decent enough to still getting some kills here, but Sub-Zero's board is pretty decent. That board with the shield plus the Shojin is very strong with the vampirism healing added to it as well. Got a decent result. And look at Pizzi, still running that very flexible Karina plus the sleight of hand kind of board. He raised the stakes. Yep. So let's see whether he can get a good thing out of it.
As you can see, that Heartsteel box is golden and bouncing, and that's obviously indicating that the stakes have been raised. So that means that if Pizzi loses, they will lose half of their hearts that they have accumulated the stacks in the Heartsteel cash out. But if they win, they will continue getting double the hearts. Does kind of grief their board there to kind of ensure that the loss streak will keep going. But the line you have to toe here, if you're Pizzi, you're sitting at 50 HP, right? You have decent gold, but you're at 50 HP, now at 39 HP, and you have to kind of create your board to be strong enough to kill some units without winning the game. But does end up getting that cash out. We'll see if it ends up paying off. Where did it go?
Dummy. The dummy.
Oh, it's the dummy. Yes,
only the dummy. Yeah.
Thank you. That is not ideal. That's a lot of HP invested in a dummy and a support item. Like the Radiant Virtue, definitely not bad, but I don't think that's the level of power that's going to justify you being sub 40 this early on into the game. But Pizzi again, very consistent player, so we'll see if they're able to kind of pull themselves out of it.
Yeah, it's a lot of healing to the comp, but at the same time, it's probably, of all support items, the easiest one there is to counter, because every single build who has built-in anti-healing is cutting off half the power of the item. So right. As you said, all of that HP invested in that, I'm not feeling it, but who knows? Let's see. Maybe something big can come out of that. It's Pizzi, after all.
And Pizzi does have the chance. Like, their economy is very good. They're 30 gold off of level 8 at 50 gold. So it's very possible that we see Pizzi, after this augment choice on 4-2, push to 8 and look for one of those 4-cost headliners. Obviously, an Ezreal would be great, but there's a lot of them that you can hit just to give yourself a lot of immediate power. It does make a great choice in getting that Gragas to give them a lot of room, their backline a lot of room to deal with some of these units, but is definitely going to continue this loss streak. So we'll see if they end up doing a roll down. If we see Pizzi go to level 8 on 4-2, we can check back in. I would imagine we'll see that, as 28 HP is very low. Prismatic as our last augment here.
That is fun. 2 games tonight, Eka, and 2 of them with prismatics going around to make things spicy. I don't know if the players love it, but we do. And by the way, Sub-Zero just hit a Seraphine 3 before the last round, so we once again have a Seraphine player coming around. So many players leveling to 8, deciding on their headlines. Pizzi already gets access to this Zed, and that's gonna be big. Of course, with that Virtual, the more to that, you know, the support item, it's gonna be really good that he has a lot of frontliners, not too many backliners, because he needs units that's gonna be taking advantage of that added healing.
Yeah, but Pizzi has a lot of decisions to make, has a lot of items on their bench they need to get on to make sure that they stay as strong as possible. Does go with that Crowd Diver Zed, so definitely a good option as a current holder. I would be surprised if Pizzi commits to that Zed long term, but it does give a lot of power right now. Does get the red buff down, so they will have a little bit of anti-healing done for Seraphine to be able to spread around very easily. And this Zed is doing a lot of work, able to take a big hit to Keynes, who is still sitting at level 7 at 50 gold. So you would hope if that was a loss for Pizzi, it would be drastically dooming for their run here, but a very good stabilization as we jump on board with Kurt Angle, who is now 3-starred 2 of their punk options.
Infernal Contract in hand, which means a lot of gold for him to roll around. Gotta wonder exactly which 3 stars is he going for. Apparently he's trying to 3-star the Twitch, but probably the Pantheon being a bit better. Maybe he's gonna run 5 punk, I don't know, who knows. We saw a lot of punk spatulas coming around in the later stages, so maybe he's praying around that one is gonna come once again and he gets access to that 6 punk later.
Yeah, and the Jinx is doing a lot of work here, but the front line is the point of contention. There's one frontline item that Kurt has slammed here in that Protector's Vow, which is one of the lower value items. So you're asking a lot of your backline, but thankfully his backline is very, very powerful, able to cut through the front line of Keens pretty easily and deal with that Kaisa on the back. So 35 gold, level 7 is locked, which again, this comp you don't really need level 8, right? You can do very well with level 7, as we do see a spat on the carousel, so that could spice things up a lot in the end of stage 4 here.
There is a glove in Kurt Angle's bench, so if people let it through, Kurt Angle could potentially go for that 6 punk. If nobody wants the spatula, keep an eye on that, because that would be so fun. Oh my, Eric, what you doing, Eric? You're spoiling our fun. We could see.
There's not a lot of comps that play well with the spatula right now. The things that come to my mind are obviously Pentakill, right? Pentakill spat, being able to put that on the Akali is very powerful. A country spat, able to get to that country 7 marker is very powerful. As we see Keens with the Ezreal, does have the blue buff, does have the IE. They're very powerful here. So I'm interested to see where that spat is going to go, but it definitely would have been useful on that punk board to allow punk 6 to be able to come into play.
Pantheon 3 hit by Kurt Angle. He is becoming more massive by the minute at 86 HP and on fire. Now we see Shaco's board also trying to play the Ezreal here, but no headliner for him. I mean, actually has the Zac headliner on the front line, who's probably going to be very big, but there's only a 1-star Ezreal to do the damage. Is it going to be enough? The Ezreal for Kings is really trying to push it through. That extra damage coming in from the Godsbreaker is nice, but that Zac is so tanky that he does the job by himself. Shaco gets the win. Now only 2 players remain on fire, Sub-Zero and Kurt Angle there at the top, 77 and 86 HP respectively. Pizzi, our very risky player for this game, is now at only 15 HP, Deca.
Yeah, again, we've talked about this a lot. There's not a lot that Pizzi would have to have a string of pretty bad games to be able to lose their spot in the top 8. But it's definitely not out of reach. But we do see Kurt Angle hitting that Twitch 3. So the question is the fact that they are locked at level 7 going to be a detriment going into stage 5 when these boards are really, really going to start to spike? Keen's board is looking good, but it's just missing a little something. The fact that the Heartsteel, the Ezreal's Heartsteel is a little bit of a detriment, but does let them play a bit risky with their HP and look for a cash out, but they're facing down a Seraphine 3 right now from Sub-Zero Arc.
Seraphine 3 that we saw being hit a while ago, not with the same items that we used to see, but the red buff, pretty good replacement for the Morelos, even if it's not the most optimal choice. Still very decent, as you can see. Takes the win over Kings, and both Sub-Zero and Kurt Angle keep themselves at the very top. Pizzi managed to get a win, so keeps himself alive at 15 HP, which on stage 5 might mean only 1 effective life, but still has a little bit of a breather.
Yeah, absolutely. And this board that Kings has put together is slowly kind of coming through, and these losses that they're taking are pretty good, right? We're talking like 3 or less units of loss, which is saving a lot of HP. But as you pointed out, as we're moving into stage 5, those 3 unit losses are going to start hitting a lot harder. So we're going to have to see some stabilization from Keens if they're going to go for like the full value of the cash out or try and stabilize going into stage 5. But on board with Shaco now that we just saw across from Keens, that Zac 2 itemized very well, able to spread out the Sunder and the the burn from Morelos. It's very, very good way of kind of spreading out those effects around the board, especially with the EDM on the Zac that allows a little bit more damage from the Zed as well. So we do see an Ezreal 1 doesn't have that headliner that you might want, but this really tanky front line is going to be hard to deal with. But let's see if Jinx with the Giant Slayer, Twitch with the Giant Slayer can make it happen.
Lots of punks, lots of 3-star units. The Golden Boys by Kurt Angle destroying the front line, but Zac survives for so long, applies the Morello on pretty much everyone. Ezreal jumping around, but is unable to kill that Pantheon, and that means the final contract is going to be truly final. Kurt Angle keeps himself on fire, wins Sub-Zero, takes the loss, goes down to 66. Now remember, Shaco versus Sub-Zero is probably our main storyline for the lobby, with both of them fighting for that top 8. On the past game, Shaco got 1 point off Sub-Zero, but now things are looking dire for Shaco.
Yeah, Shaco definitely not in a comfortable position. Kurt Angle is now hitting the Vex 3, and last time we saw Kurt, I mentioned that the thing that was missing from Kurt's board was lack of frontline items. That has been addressed, and that Ezreal 1 was just not strong enough to chew through that. And with so many people like positioning for that Ezreal chosen, it's going to be very hard, especially not even with a pair, for Shaco to find the extra units, because they need something to do damage. Eric Bot on the other side is, not in the higher strengths of the board, does have the chosen, the headliner from the Echo that's going to be a little bit annoying to deal with, but Ezreal is going to be able to hop around the board and deal with that pretty easily. So probably a big sigh of relief here from Shaco that they are able to sort of keep a little bit of HP, as we see Kings dropping down to 6 HP.
Much needed win for Shaco. Finds the Ezreal pair, but still gonna be only on the Zed pair, Ezreal pair. Unlucky with his rolls, unfortunately, so things are just not looking good. Kings, though, very close to elimination. Playing Ezreal, Jazz here, very good. So for Jazz, it's a big buff for Kings, and it's sad for Shaco, because Shaco would love for Kings to be eliminated and some Ezreals going onto the pool. We have 3 players, maybe even 4, at the risk of elimination at this very round, and we see Kings is going to be facing off against PT, so one of them has a very good chance of going down and being eliminated. The Akali goes all the way into the Ezreal here, but he jumps around and escapes for a bit. PT is on a bit of more of a flexible board. Kings relying on his binary, providing the exact items that he wants. A lot of healing was on the front line. It was enough for the front line to survive, but the Lucian is really trying here. He's not able to. Kings takes the loss. Shaco survives. Eric takes the loss, Ridiata as well, so 2 players eliminated. Shaco now has a lot more Ezreals on the pool and the chance to get himself that 2-star Ezreal. And there is a Punk special on the carousel. If they live it, is Eric gonna live it? This time around, can Kurt Angle get it and make it 6 Punk?
Oh, yeah. Kurt,
what?
He doesn't take it. That's interesting to me. That's actually really interesting to me. I would love if production, if we could check out Kurt Angle's board, if you don't mind. I would love to see where that determination was made. I mean, but I don't want to get away from this. I want to point this out. Keen's obviously not what you want to see as an 8th right there, right? But like going from 1st to 8th is such a dramatic difference here. So it looks like, this is what it looks like. It looks like Kurt has positioned away from that and gone to the Executioner, which makes a lot more sense. Because again, if the board looked like it did last time we saw it, the Punk spat makes a lot more sense. So this is definitely where you want to be in the Twin Terror matchup. This is the Twin Terrors that win games, right? The Twitch and the Vex, especially with the Executioner, allowing you to get to that 4 Executioner mark, is so much raw damage, and the Twin Terror is giving so much extra survivability to your front line. And it looks like this might be the it for Shaco. It
is the end for Shaco. It makes a lot of sense, not only to transition into this Executioner boards. Good angle by Kurt Angle. I mean, it was well pointed out by you, Deca, before, whether that Infernal Contract and sticking around on 7 would be detrimental. It actually wasn't. It was actually a nice way to pivot into something else stronger. So it's awesome to see a player go onto a 3-star, keep it for a long while, and then pivot out onto another 3-star, So very well executed by him, guarantees himself a top 4 already, a top 3 probably, judging by the HP boss on everyone. Gets the elimination on Shaco. Now, of course, that means Shaco is gonna get a bit of a rougher time on his 1v1 against Sub-Zero.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is a very risky maneuver, because if you don't hit that, I think we have a little bit of freeze here, but if you don't hit that Vex or that Twitch, you're in a really, really bad spot, right? But the fact that Kurt knew that they had the HP lead to, to risk it, right? Like if you're sitting in 75 HP on stage 5, you can take those riskier plays, knowing that even if you lose a few rounds, you'll probably still be in the top 2, top 3 HP leads. But that didn't happen. Kurt is sitting very solidly in first. Sub-Zero are pretty close behind them, but this is looking like it could be the end for Tarzan here, as they do go out in 4th place. Does secure themselves the top 4 there, does keep making that push to make it into playoffs. As we've talked about, Tarzan or Nazrat was definitely on the edge of being eliminated today. So a big win there from Tarzan, able to kind of keep pushing themselves deeper into that playoff contention.
Definitely gets the top 4 spot. Now only 3 players remaining: Kurt Angle, Sub-Zero, and PT. PT being the only one on fire. We could only hope that PT's fire would be able to unfreeze this, but unfortunately right now, getting a bit stuck here. I gotta say, I'm sensing a team when we have Sub-Zero in the lobby. Things get frozen.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Let's talk about who we do have. All right, Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle,
yes,
obviously playing extremely well today. One of those players that were very solidly finished in the middle of the pack so far. So Kurt with a big top 3. We don't know the results just yet, but I think our production is going to let us know pretty soon. But definitely keeps pushing them into, we are solidified in playoffs, right? Then we have Sub-Zero Arc. Again, another player that is sort of in that edge position, looking for that top 8. That top 8 is so important, Blackfeet, because it gives you that freedom of not only not having to play in week 1, right? So no risk in that week 1 of playoffs. So you can you're already in a deeper position, but you also get to watch, right? You get to watch the players, watch their tendencies. You get to watch the meta and see how it shifts, because as these tournaments go on, you have the overall meta of TFT, but then you have a tournament meta, right? Where things become a little more prioritized. You see people that are pushing more toward one comp or another, and you get to kind of learn that about who you're playing against. And that's a huge advantage. So if they can secure that top 8 spot, if they can get that bye from the week 1 of playoffs, it doesn't ensure you a deep run, right? But it definitely puts you off a foot ahead of everyone else that doesn't have that.
Definitely, it is very important. We apologize to our audience for the technical difficulties. It turns out that trying to join back and getting unfrozen, the game was already finished, so we're gonna at least get the results for you. So PT ends up 3rd place, and then Nazareth 2nd, Kings. No. That's the result from game 1. That is the result from game 1, because Tarzan took top 4 on this last game. So still waiting on the actual results. Jumping ahead on myself here. We saw that we had at the very end PT surviving at 16 HP, and then Sub-Zero at 66, Kurt Angle at 75. So those two, Sub-Zero and Kurt Angle, pretty much fighting each other for the top 1. PT at very low HP, but I mean, gotta point out by PT again, amazing run, because at stage 4, at the end of stage 4 there, we thought PT was done. His game was just not looking good. He was trying to be as flexible as possible, but things just did not end up his route. And then somehow he just manages the miracle comeback, pulls it off, goes at least to the 3rd place. Still gonna confirm what his final position was. Oh, we actually get onto the end of the game here. The game is not finished, but so we have crazy things happening around. PT finishes 3rd place once again. So great result, as I was saying. We didn't expect much of a comeback from that comp, but he proves why he's at the top. He managed to get a 2nd, 3rd place in tonight, so that's amazing for him. And now we see the Executioners versus the Seraphim, so Kurt Angle versus Sub-Zero. And by the way, Decker, Seraphim top 2 once again.
Yeah, and shout out for Tarzan keeping the stream going so that we can keep watching these fights, right? But a huge fight here. The Echo 3 is going to provide uh, so much time for the Seraphine to do a lot of damage. We have the backline access on both the Seraphine ability and also the static shiv from the Ari. We'll see which one plays out here as we a little bit of stuff. The Akali is back on the backline, but these Vexes are suddenly untouched. The Card Assault not going to do a lot yet, but that will change soon. The Akali is creating a lot of space for the Seraphine, but this Vex is just shredding through everything. A little bit of HP left, and it looks like the Seraphine is going to come up on top as we push Kurt Angle a little bit further. But we've got a decent amount of HP to chew through here for both of these players.
Having that Akali with an Edge of Night, as you mentioned, buying so much time, opening space for the Seraphine is so good. Then you have the Ari. She's able to get executions even at massive 3-star frontline targets. Takes a while, of course, but she does get there. The comp over there is a little bit comped up, so it's not gonna fully escape from the AoEs from the Seraphine. And then the cherry on top, an Echo 3, which is a very rare frontline to find, but was found with a steadfast heart on it. It's massive. Yeah,
and again, just having now being able to go level 9, have the economy to go level 9 whenever Kurt Angle is locked at 7 on that eternal contract, allows him to play. Not only does it allow him to play a good unit, we get a little good ad there. That's really nice. But it does have the extra allow as a good unit, but also the tentacles are another target, right? It can eat a Karth Assault. It can eat a Vex ult. It can do a lot to make space for these backline to do damage.
And now let's see the Kali on the corner. Once again, the Seraphine dealing the AoE. Look at that HP from the Pantheon completely disappearing. The Akali runs around, smashes everyone with hot kunais, and the Seraphine throws one more AoE. The little Vex is going to be left alone in the corner. It's not going to be enough, and it's a big win here for Sub-Zero and the Seraphine. Once again, Seraphine runs rampant on our lobby. Amazing to see. It is a comp that, as you mentioned, we forgot about talking before we came onto game 1, and for 2 games, it surprises us and is matches.
Yeah, a very powerful comp that if you can get that front line with enough beef to kind of give Seraphine space. She provides so much AoE damage, so much AoE shred that you didn't have the Morellos, but had the red buff, accomplishing pretty much the same goal with the burn, with the heal reduction, with everything that you need. Was a little too much for the level 7 board to handle, but a great. I don't want to diminish how well Kurt Angle played that game. Having the Jinx 3 early, it is so difficult to decide whether to sell a 3-cost headliner or a 3-star headliner or not. And Kurt was able to make that decision, commit to it, and solidify themselves in a top 2 in a situation where they need that top 2, right? Again, we want consistency, and there's no more consistent player today than Kurt. Kurt's playing fantastically in that game, and I hope to see that in the next set of games as well.
Definitely. Amazing way to start off tonight with these 2 games. Now we have only 2 more to come on, and then the week 4 is going to be finished, and the league stage is going to be finished, and then we're going to know everyone who makes it to playoffs. But to bring that all to you are going to be 2 new faces. That's our shout out for me and Decker. So thank you, Decker. A pleasure one more night, and where people can find you.
Yeah, I mean, so I am pretty much that Decker guy, as you see below me on everything. If I'm competing currently in the AAL, which is the D1 cap league for Aegis, so I'll be streaming that tomorrow. If you want to see a lot less quality gameplay than this, feel free around 3 p.m. Central to come stop by my stream and say hello.
Okay, that's it. You can find me at SvelveLikeP on Twitter, and of course, casting here at Aegis. Always on the ACL, maybe on the ML as well. Now, that's it for game 2. 2 more games coming in hot, so don't go anywhere.
Hello there, everyone, and welcome now to Games 3 and eventually 4 here at the ACL. I am ProTroid. Joining me is Invective. We got a lot of great stuff happening in Game 1 and 2. Sub-Zero may have frozen things over a little bit, but we've sufficiently warmed the servers back up as we get ready for Game 3.
Yeah, I think one of the hottest comps in the meta right now is Pentakill, one which we haven't yet seen win today, but which is very, very popular and which can be very dominant if given the right items and the right setup.
And there are different variants of the pentakill composition as well, too, right? Like, there's a big one, obviously, where you have the Karthus Viego and Akali trio, but you also see some players now going for more of the Kayle reroll at lower levels thanks to the sheer amounts of power that she has now adopted on this patch.
Yeah, I think that has been a fascinating rework, but the story of the last two games has been the dominance of Seraphine and other Spellweavers. I think that Seraphine is an incredibly powerful composition, as evidenced not least by the performance in our tournament, but also I think that there is a lot of room for innovation with Spellweavers at all levels, whether that's Annie or Lulu reroll as well. I think Lulu takes a lot of advantage from the Twin Terror rework that just puts all of the power into health and attack speed.
And maybe you could walk me through that a little bit, because when I was originally looking into Seraphine reroll, I was walking into it with the impression that this is going to be a really great counter to Twisted Fate last patch, because, you know, if you're playing Disco, you're all going to be bunched up. You're just going to be in a prime position for a choice Seraphine ulti. But she's actually persisted beyond that as we've gone to multiple patches. Can you walk me through why that's happened?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Seraphine is in a very good position to take advantage of the lack of strong frontline damage in the metagame, right? I think Ahri has fallen back a little bit, and even though Twisted Fate was an ideal matchup for Seraphine, she also does very well into Karthus and decently into Ezreal and Zed, where I think that a 3-star Nico or a 3-star Echo in the frontline, when you are holding them up with Seraphine's healing, that can do so much to have that comp scale up with Spellweavers gaining AP per cast.
Not to mention the fact, too, that Seraphine fits really nicely into a AP Flex 2-cost meta that we've also seen developing at that lower end of the lobby. I know Clement Chu was talking about it on Twitter the past couple of days here, where if you have just that superfan frontline core, all of a sudden you can open yourself up to playing the Seraphine, playing the Katarina, playing even other things like the Senna, too. So really curious to see if we're going to see flex options there, if that Seraphine becomes a little bit too contested. But from here, we are going to come into our first game as players going to start figuring out their first portal.
Yeah, and I think that with 2 games left on the day, with 2 games left in the regular season, there is a lot at stake. For one player, Hanako, this basically means that she could claim the first place in the entire ACL season, which is a huge accomplishment across 4 weeks of play and comes with a little cash prize as well.
Yeah, it is going to be a nice little boon to help things, and it also makes sense why we're seeing our players start with something a little bit lower stakes kind of moving into here, right? Free random 1-cost champions, that's not going to tilt the scales in any kind of crazy direction here. It really is going to be that classic game of TFT.
I completely agree, ProTroid. One thing that makes this portal feel particularly friendly is that if you are so inclined, you can start making econ intervals early on in these neutral rounds by solo playing a Tahm Kench, a Olaf, or a Lilia, and that can allow you to make 10 early on with these white orb drops.
Yeah, it is always interesting to see how players are able to go around that, and let alone the fact you could get something dropped, like, say, for example, I don't know, a Vex or something crazy like that, which would also put you even closer to getting some of those early econ breakpoints. So I'm always curious to see exactly what direction that's going to go. Speaking, by the way, of AP2 cost flex, all of them came out to play here in the shop for Hanako right now. Senna, Bard, Seraphine, Katarina. Those all look pretty viable to me.
I think that the luxury of choice can sometimes be paralyzing, ProTroid. These are very, very compelling, but without seeing more items, I wouldn't know which one to go for. And it looks like, as for Hanako, her decision is, let's pick up Seraphine for now.
Yeah, I agree. That's certainly the safest of all of them. The items don't quite match at this stage right now, but you have a pretty good defensive core that can work into a few different situations. And speaking of more bog standard games of TFT, we are going to be starting out with gold augments, so nothing like the crazy prismatics of Game 2.
Yeah, I think shock treatment could be a very interesting option if Hanako wants to push the tempo. but
Oh.
Metalheads will actually be her choice. And as we mentioned in pregame, Pentakill is such a powerful option, but Metalheads can be tough to get to the late game with enough gold to hit the 3-4 costs that go on the Pentakill board.
Let alone the fact that you're making a statement on stage 2-1 that loudly proclaims, "Hello everyone, I am playing Pentakill, contest me at your own peril." Because then you're going to run into people like Nihil, who already has 4 Olafs here at 2-1, could potentially have 6 Olafs if they truly wanted to slam 2 lesser duplicators, which is a little bit crazy to me, but you go off. All of that makes very crazy possibilities.
But this is very interesting, right? Because Nihil had 2 options for 1 cost reroll in Olaf and in Yasuo, but we are going to be leveling up to 4. Does Nihil place a lot of value into the Yones and the Rivens of the world, or are they going to cook up something like Executioners or Misfortune? There's a whole lot left to be said, and I'm not sure that there's a whole lot of direction on the board just yet.
At the end of the day, too, these 2-star 1 costs do provide a good degree of just safety in this early to mid-game stretch. Olaf famously sort of serves that same role that Corki did during the Vegas meta, where he can kind of persist up until stage 4 and just be fine. He's a good unit, particularly if you can find that Titan's Resolve. And I've even seen some players use this headliner version of Yasuo with the Execute also in that similar regard, just to make sure they can stabilize in this early game.
Yeah, very compelling. And as we go up against a player who looks to be named Aphelios, but has mostly bruisers, I think that this board is going to be enough, and Nihil wisely makes 10 gold here.
Yeah, I gotta say, this is a pretty good move. It also just further showcases that contention that we see on Pentakill right now. 1 player of Metalheads, 2 players that both prioritize the early Olaf. Again, Olaf doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be going into Pentakill into the late game. He just really is a strong early game unit, but hey, it does at least help you pave that way early on. And speaking of full econ starts, we gotta talk about Kanedru right now, who has been selling a good chunk of their board here and is only just starting to build something up now they've hit 20.
And Kanedru really looks to be playing towards the Seraphine that we've spoken of before. I think that that is going to be one option available to him as he enters stage 3-2. If he full loss streaks to that stage, then he is going to be able to put together a very compelling roll down at that level. But at the same time, if you find something like a Kale and a Mordekaiser and a Gnar, he could be going to level 8 for the Pentakill as well. I think it just comes down to whether he determines that that's too contested for him and he's not willing to take that risk.
For now, though, the econ will at least give them a little more space to make those choices. However, their HP total will pay the price in the meantime. So certainly going against something like this early Mosher board that Keynes has put together, you don't really got a lot that can stand in front of that Vi.
There isn't a lot, and Vi has been so dominant over the course of this patch as one of these early game carries alongside Moshers like Gnar, Set, and Jax, because with the buffs to Punk and the buffs to her stats, it is just a ball of power that not only dominates, but is a good match against other early game carries such as Olaf. But we're heading to the carousel, and there is some powerful stuff here. There's a Vex with a belt for people trying to play Executioners, and there's this Urgot, which has been such a powerful unit.
I mean, you've been saying that. I was looking at that Kale with the bow that Pizza was actually able to grab. Another very strong unit with, again, a core item on top of it. Do definitely agree with that Urgot pickup, though. Has another one of those units that received some changes in this patch specifically that's made it even stronger against single targets, which if you pick one up in the early game, you're definitely going to have to deal with a few of those.
I think that this is just a hugely powerful spot for Keynes, though, who we've just hopped onto, and wow, for Mosher early on, it can be very, very hard to deal with this without some kind of anti-heal.
Yeah, and even then, too, it's not just the Formasher. You also have Idealism pumping even more damage and healing onto your frontline Vi. So all this is going to work together to make a pretty good core. However, look at what Relic's got on their side of the board right there. Early Seraphine headliner. Can't quite tell if that's going to be the KDA or the Spellweaver variant. Really hoping it's Spellweaver because KDA isn't the way you truly want to go in that regard. But still, that will make this early game Vi maybe hurt a little bit more than she'd like.
The front line here is clumped up. Seraphine keeps casting, but Vi keeps healing. And this is why I think Morellonomicon or Red Buff is so important on the Seraphine, because she hits a wide group of units as they all clump up, but she doesn't have the single target damage to hold down a unit that has healing built in, such as Vi with the Mosher. And that's just another victory for Keens, who's been up and down on the day with a first and an eighth.
Yeah, and again, we were talking about all of these powerful early game one costs. A few different players of the Olaf. We're now over here at Pizza's board, who has also picked up a Vi for themselves, and heck, even has a few more at that regard already at 6 here. So to me, this looks like it's the beginnings of a more traditional punk board. Already have this early game armor shred slammed as well, which would be very useful in no matter what AD board you do decide to go. Curious to see though where this is going to end up.
This is very flexible for Pizza, right? By taking something like Three's Company early, they've opened their economy up for the rest of the game, and you can just see them dominating Hanako in this fight and making 40 gold at that. I think Hanako would have really wanted to win this round in order to make sure that her econ was ready to play pentakill later in the game, and this is just a cherry on top for Pizza.
Yeah, it's also important to further go into that Freeze Company too, because again, that's effectively been an econ augment for them, right? I don't see a single free cost unit on their board. Everything was invested into getting that economic power, and in spite of that, they only lost once on stage 2 too. They've been able to build up a strong board that has also allowed them to get a good econ going to make those late game decisions. So this is all really impressive to see.
Yeah, you know, I think one of the reasons you would take something like Three's Company is to fish for Heartsteel. So maybe failing that, Pizza just decided, hey, I've got a really powerful board put together with this Vi and 4 Punk. I think that I can do some damage, and I'm just going to play around these units. There's no shame in that.
Yeah, definitely. And on top of that too, they've already made that full commit into the Even Shroud that proves that they're going to be going for that AD line. And whenever you're able to make that early of a commit in a game, your whole game just kind of warps and becomes a little bit clearer, right? You're not getting as dizzy. You're focusing in on a couple of different comps. And granted, you can run into a few weird situations where you just get dropped like 4 rods by the time you hit to the Raptor round. But I don't want to curse anyone here, so I'm just going to leave it at that.
Here's what I want to know. Is Pizza confident enough to slam one of these items that they have available to them? Because I don't think that any of these really fits into AD Flex as we traditionally know it, but we are making an interesting 4 Mosher board with the Jax chosen over Vi. This is a bold move, as I think Jax doesn't really have all that he needs to succeed on this board, but it could very well work out going up against a weak Bobster.
At least for now, it will be enough to appears to hold on to the win streak. But I do agree, they do see a good utility frontline items here, which are always safe to slam. However, you already have the Even Shroud. You want to try to make sure you're able to get even points to your items to take you deeper down that AD tree. And now you just got a Shiv on your bench. So that doesn't quite feel too good if you're Pizza.
The components that Pizza is looking for, frustratingly enough, I think they're the ones that are going to be the most contested. The tier for blue buff, for example. As we are with Bobster, rolling these augments, and we're going to be taking the Capricious Forge. I think that this is a very hard augment to play around. I don't know of a lot of units that use this use the blacksmith gloves all that well, and on this board for the time being I don't see an ideal candidate either. Now you don't love to see 2 AP items on Vi. That might be worst in slot.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you could still get some interesting stuff with Goldmancer from a couple of errant Vi hits here and there, but I agree, this is always such a weird augment to take here. A lot of the combinations that you see, I think, are usually the safest on a frontliner or a more utility unit, just because they'll be able to get some use out of them either way. But I agree, this just does feel a little bit awkward, and granted, the Cluttered Mind has been doing pretty well for them to help them get into those late game scenarios, but I'm not quite sure where that item is going to fit in here. But it also seems like Hanako, she's also decided to go for it too.
Right. I think in the larger picture, though, Hanako's a lot happier to have the board power right now when she's at 20 gold and trying to make the most out of the health advantage and the unit advantage she's got. Whereas Bobster, I think on a 7 loss streak, you really want something that is going to turn the train around in the late game, because you're nowhere close to making it happen in the mid game.
Yeah, because again, everything we see from Bobster is just sacrificing as much of your health as possible to get to that early 8 as fast as you can. But again, I look at everything that I see right here and just go, how much health is Bobster going to even have to work with? How many mistakes are they going to be allowed to make once they go through with that? But here, though, we have to switch over to Relic. It looks like they've gone for a Crowd Diver Katarina in this mid game, which I don't think this is where this is going to end up, just because I don't think that IE Jeweled Gauntlet interaction, that hasn't quite worked for a couple of patches now, so we can just disregard that. But at the very least, this is going to be strong enough to help make sure that you're preserving as much health as possible.
One thing that I think is going to be possible with this Katarina, though, is you can pop off these items with Superfan, and then you can pivot the Infinity Edge to someone like Yone or Zed later on. It might just be the case that because there are no other upgraded units on the Hills board here, that they want all the power they can get on the Katarina, which I think is an interesting and bold choice.
Yeah, the Superman pop-off is always such a clever move that players can work with, just because it's an easy way to get some of those more junk items that they weren't quite trying to figure out off of their carry. So curious to see how that will end up here at the end of the day. Here, though, we are another carousel. Already see that Ezreal that we were talking about, and Pizza makes a beeline for it.
Ezreal has been such a powerful carry in the meta, Protroid. I think by buffing pieces around him and by not really nerfing Heartsteel all that much, he has taken a dominant position in the late game as people realize, hey, this unit actually has a very powerful board to be played around with Zed.
And it was interesting to see, too, because when I was commentating the TOC7, I saw a lot of Ezreal Zed, and I found out through the days that it was a composition that was picking up a lot of steam in Latin America. It was trying to seep a little bit more into the international scene. And then naturally, the week after that, I start seeing all of my NA ranked games as well. So it does a lot of the things that Ezreal used to do alongside the Caitlyn back in the day. However, just has that safety, still has a good enough front line in front of him with the combined forces of the Crowd Diver and the other Heartsteel units, so it just is effective here at the end of the day, as Aphelios looks like they've been going as deep into bruisers as they can.
This is an odd situation to find yourself in if you are the player on the other side of the aisle. You've got a whole lot of Tahm Kenches and not quite enough Olafs, especially to win this round against Relic's Senna. I think that, well, Olaf doesn't seem to be too hampered, though.
Yeah, Olaf can always do a little more than you kind of expect, so certainly the rest of the board might follow. It may be Olaf versus the world. However, without a single bit of anti-heal to the Seraphine's name, that means that Olaf can just 1v9.
Yeah, when you look at Relic's spot, I don't think you're particularly worried about one unit loss in the mid game. Look at their augments. They have Patient Study, meaning they get +1 EXP from a loss, and they have Last Stand. They were win streaking before this round. I think that's a crazy position to find yourself in. Level 750 gold.
Yeah, it's just absolutely insane to me, because it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. You're trading in some of this economic power for late game board strength, but you're still able to build an early and mid game board, so it doesn't matter that you're down in augment versus some of these other players. So it really has been working pretty nicely for Relic here, that 1-1 unit loss notwithstanding.
And I guess the question for Relic is, are you going to be rolling down on level 8 for something like Ari, who would go very well with these superfans? Or do you have the confidence to stay on this Senna and go all the way to level 9, where you could even find something like Ziggs, but you have a lower chance of finding like a game-changing 5-cost headliner than you would really like to?
They do have 78 HP, as we were talking about, so it does give them a tiny little bit of wiggle room. I think for me, I would like to see some upgrade over the Senna soon, just that way you can maintain the tempo, and then you could start figuring out how deep you want to go. But let's take a look over here at Bobster's perspective, whew, that's a lot of gold right there. 86, 92, just to rattle off a couple of numbers for you. They're getting ready for a deep roll down, and hell, they're doing it actually here on the Wolf round, not even going to wait until stage 4-1.
Yeah, this is probably the best time to do it for Bobster. I think that when you are in stage 4-1, you have a lot of decisions to make in a 30-second time frame, but it looks like Bobster has already been able to upgrade Caitlyn to, and will be pairing that with the Zed. I think that makes him a lot more confident in the future of this stage.
Yeah, I think we can just refer to the Caitlyn as a discount Ezreal and call it a day, kind of looking at these numbers. This is going to work very effectively here. Zed can do a lot of great single target damage to the front line, while Caitlyn will just clean up anything that she can really get a shot off on. And also, looking at your items here, I see a lot of really nice stuff for the Zed at the end of the day, right? Like, the IE is obvious, but then you can also go for something like the Sterix, or you could try to go also for a Titan's Resolve. Your only issue would be a lack of healing.
Yeah, one of my questions is, are you going to have enough items to make both Caitlyn and Zed valuable? Infinity Edge and Guardbreaker are a really good start, and I think they signify to me that Bobster will eventually try to get around to playing the Ezreal as well. But against Aphelios, who I believe is a bit of a substitute, Bobster has fallen yet again. And let us not forget, Bobster was in a lobby earlier with yet another random player and placed below them. No shame though, every single one of the ACL players actually ended up placing below the random in that game.
Hey, it's always a fun thing to see, but for here, we're going to have to see if any of these augments are going to be enough to turn it around. I really like the little buddies pickup here. However, I only see 2 1 and 2 star units on this board right now. The free cost units don't contribute anything to it, so that's going to be a little bit awkward and maybe not as many stats as Bobster might need to get real power out of this gold augment.
One of the most difficult things, I think, about playing around little buddies with AD flex is that you don't know which supporting units you should keep around, because this Senna is extremely valuable on this board, but you could really use something like a Garen as well, and Bobster just doesn't have that yet.
Yeah, on top of that too, itemization, I'm still not a huge fan of it here at the end of the day. The fact that you don't have healing on the Zed, the fact that you are going to be struggling to get through some of these early game units. I do agree, I love the roll down on the Wolfround just to give yourself a little bit more time and also a chance to hit some of these units before anyone else can get them out of the pool. But I'm not sure if it's going to be doing anything more than just stemming the bleeding.
Yeah, we can see across the aisle that Relic really did want to stem that bleeding, like you said, and not go straight to level 9, but now they're in a bit of an economic hole and might not be able to find themselves a way to cap out for the first place, which is what those augments and that spot really incline me to play for. Now we're with Keens, who found the metalheads late and is doing that roll down for Pentakill, which we know to be very contested in the lobby, but he hits the Horde. He hits the Karthus!
Yeah, isn't even the headliner, doesn't even need it, so that's insane to see. Finds a Karthus headliner anyway, sure, welcome to the party. Decides to roll over it though, just to try to keep the Viego dream alive here at the end of the day. That's pretty insane to see.
I think that might just be right though. From my experience playing around this composition, I don't think that 2 Karthuses does enough damage to keep you in the fight long enough for either Karthus to be relevant.
I mean, I can do a little bit better than that, where I can tell you that I tried that earlier today, and it certainly doesn't give you enough time to stay relevant in these late game fights. But at the end of the day, that was still crazy to see from Keens here. Being able to pick up this Karthus this early when we know that Pentakill is going to be contested is absolutely huge here for them. And on top of that too, they also have good items for the Karthus at the end of the day too. I know a lot of folks still like the Shojin. It works great with the extra attack speed that Pentakill provides, but a lot of players have been gravitating more for the steady mana generation that you see from the Adaptive Helm.
One of the most important things of the Adaptive Helm, like you pointed out, one of the things that makes this so powerful on Karthus is that while he's channeling the light, or the Deathbringer, or whatever it is called, he actually gains mana. So he's setting himself up for the next cast when he has that helmet on.
Yeah, and obviously Karthus cannot attack at all while channeling, for it would be very unsportsmanlike and rude, which we do appreciate for that. But I completely agree. It just is a very good use of itemization that I don't really think the stats even reflect right now if you look at any of the stat tools that players maybe want to peruse on their own time. But for here, though, again, Keens has been able to build out a very strong board here. Don't quite have a third item for this Karthus just yet, nor a headliner to their board's name.
This is one of the big challenges when you're playing inflexibly. When you have committed yourself to an augment like Metalheads, when you have committed yourself to a line like this, you really only want one or two Chosens. And unfortunately for Keens, you are playing around Superfan as well. So I think that this spot can be so punishing, and it looks like Aphelios is going to be taking a win against Keens with this Olaf reroll.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's the classic, I'm going to run Superfan, but I can't quite find a headliner to work with it, so that is going to be a little bit of board power that is missing right here, so that is going to be very rough to see for Keens, as Aphelios, as you said, is just going to keep working around with this Olaf, something that I would expect to start falling off now as players are beginning to start thinking about working anti-heal into their compositions, but still can get you pretty deep in these games.
There's going to be more and more crowd control. There's going to be more of these powerful tanks. And Pizza's got two of them on their board. The Blitzcrank and the Poppy are both going to do a lot to protect this front line. But here's one thing. Pizza doesn't necessarily have the duo carry like the Zed that we've spoken of as being so powerful, so enabling for this Ezreal. You know, Ezreal hits a lot of units for widespread damage, but Zed cleans them all up. And I don't see that yet for Pizza.
Yeah, but you know what I see on the other side of the board for Kandrew? They were able to hit that Seraphine free, so that is absolutely huge here, and it also means that Pizza gets absolutely cleaned up. Bobster too, look at the right side of the screen, down to 1 HP, so that is going to be a dream and all that's left for him.
This lobby is shaping up to have some really powerful competitors at the top and a few people falling out at the bottom. Unfortunately for Pizza, unfortunately for Bobster, I can't be convinced that they have a way out of the situation they've put themselves into.
Yeah, because at this point, it requires so much to just go right to hit that top 4, right? Because Bobster at 1 HP, Pizza at 8, they're looking at the 6th place player, Relic, who is in the 30s alongside Keens. That's a lot of HP they're going to have to survive past, where it's just harder and harder to stay that lucky.
Yeah, Relic has got the last stand too, don't forget about that. And
true.
Bobster, unfortunately, at 1 HP, saw the Heartsteel Ezreal in his shop. And that was one thing that you would have loved to see in a different spot with a little bit more HP. And unfortunately, it's just not the story of this game.
Yeah, it's never in the game that you play the Heartsteel Ezreal that you find the big shot or Heartsteel Ezreal, I think, at the end of the day. But that's at least the story that I think most players can relate to. For now, though, we're just going to see how Bobster is able to clean things up with these items right now, because they're still looking to sort of finish itemizing both their Zed alongside the Caitlyn, and I'm not too crazy about any of the options they got here.
It can be very difficult because I think that Bobster, for example, slammed this bow earlier on the Zed, was looking for just a little bit more power to win out some fights, but he ended up with red buff stuck on Zed when you would really love to see that on someone like Caitlyn. That makes this spot just a little bit more difficult as you don't get that spread. And in the fight against Kandrew, where you want anti-heal to be spread, it's not going to be enough. Seraphine is going to be taking out Bobster, and unfortunately, that looks like 8th place.
On top of that too, Zed was just on the opposite side for that Seraphine, wasn't quite able to get in an optimal position to get back there quickly, and that just was all that she wrote. Meanwhile, Hanako, it looks like she's been able to go deep into this Kale line, which I gotta say, I am still such a huge fan of, and we also get to preview the fall of the Olaf for Aphelios right now. Again, the Morellos on this Kale did so much work just to ensure that he couldn't heal up and sustain tank through that fight.
One thing that I think Olaf really struggles with is a scaling attack speed carry like this Kale, right? Every unit that has mana gains mana when they are attacked by an enemy. But Olaf has no mana and has no way to take advantage of the fact that Kale attacks him 5 times a second.
Yeah, that certainly sums it up, and we're going to have to see how Kandrew is going to be able to resolve around this too. Remember, these are 2 completely separate 2-cost rerolls. I think we also had the Katarina on another board, so really predictions are going to be coming true here. However, while the Kale has to work through things one after the other, Seraphine still has the huge AoE damage at her back, so that means that she's going to be able to take down the Kale before Kale can really burst through too much of Kandrew's board.
Yeah, Protroid, I think we're going to need to see a few more impactful upgrades for Hanako before the board is ready to take on someone like Kanedru's. But look at Kanedru's economy. By using return on investment as his second augment, he was able to keep his econ really healthy while getting an extra slot on the board. And now we are going to be looking at level 8 with 9 units in play. That can be so impactful for the end game.
You really have to manage your econ so carefully when you're running for one of these 2-cost compositions, right? Because if you're not careful, you're going to spend way too much time rolling at 6 or rolling at 7 to try to find that 3-star carry, and then it just won't work out. You won't really have the econ to get much more than a top 4. But for Kanedru right now, I agree. They were able to get more board strength out of those continued rolls. We've seen more players rolling here on 7 just because of all the cappers of 4 costs that you can find. And here, we're going to have to see exactly how that will shake off against a more traditional Ahri board that Relic is running in the background. So far, the Seraphine hasn't quite been able to find any good shots just yet, and the Ahri just does what she's known for, tearing away at targets one at a time, one after the other, but gets stunned up by the Lulu. That's not going to be enough.
Wow, I think what we are seeing is the development of the meta, new versus old, right? What Relic has been a very powerful board before, but this Seraphine composition simply has better tools to deal with a wide frontline. And Ahri is just one girl. She only hits one unit at a time. So it seems like in that matchup, Relic didn't have the power to get through all of Kanedru's frontline before it became relevant.
I do have to make one quick correction there. Ahri is a pop star and deserves to be treated with that respect. Regardless of any of that, though, I completely agree. There was just a lot of strength that Seraphine was able to have as the up-and-coming meta darling, as we've been sort of seeing. And from there, it means that she's been able to really recruit a lot of this. You already talked pretty eloquently on just how strong the Morello's is on her. It means that she's able to apply it across such a wide variety of units and just get that ticking drain on so many folks.
And now Kanedru has an economic advantage that can really last the rest of the game. You see him playing 2 Lulus. This is part of what makes Lulu reroll so strong, by the way, but by playing 2 Lulus, you basically just get another Hyper Pop battery, and that makes this a powerful level up regardless of whether it's just a 1-cost unit.
Yeah, Lulu is going to be an incredibly strong way to ensure that without any attack speed, you're still going to have as many Seraphine casts as possible. Lots of early Viegos onto the backline get some good damage, but already it's going to be proven irrelevant here as Keynes actually takes a better loss than I expected as that 1 Carpus ulti lands.
There's greed on both sides here, right? You can see that Keynes, even at 14 HP, seems to be willing to risk it all to go to something like level 9, or at the very least, roll down and get one more big push at level 8. You can see him avoiding the trap of rolling constantly at 0 gold, despite the fact that we saw him in a difficult position without a headliner earlier.
Meanwhile, we could take a look at what Relic's been up to. Last Stand has been activated. The true tradition of the Sentinel Ahri has been invoked here as well. However, again, we've seen players do more with Spellweavers these days than KDA, so very curious to see how that is going to work in their favor. A Ghost Ward will be a little bit of a respite here for Relic. Curious to see if that's going to be enough. Great to see the Ahri immediately on the Mordekaiser as well. However, we are going to see the Viego come down pretty quick and even sustain. No, can't sustain. Ahri's able to shift focus over just in time to keep things going. And yeah, I gotta say, everything that we're seeing here from the Last Stand, it's working out great for Ahri.
I completely agree, Protroid. Last Stand is one of the most powerful augments for this composition for a very good reason. This comp depends on you sustaining through the bursts of your enemies and Ahri continuing to heal up all of your units. Last Stand giving all your units more durability, more lifesteal, that is so valuable. And now Keynes, the risk has not yet paid off. He is at 5 HP and that is not a lot of room to work with.
Yeah, again, they still managed to hit this trifecta of 2-star forecasts, so that will be very helpful to try to see what they can do, especially when the health totals are starting to get closer and closer together at this stage. We talked about a 25 HP gap previously. Now I see 4 members all on single-digit HP with Hanako close behind at 17.
My question is Keen's even going to level 9? Look at what he's got on his bench. 2 more Akalis. And you don't have a very powerful level up either. So are we just going to roll it all down?
I don't think so. It was a good prediction, but no, we are just going to level things up here. I agree. I'm not too crazy about any options, but honestly, a random Thresh 2 is nothing to sneeze at here.
Oh, it's a really, really important hit, actually. It gets Guardian for Nico, and Thresh can make a huge impact on these late game fights, particularly if you're not fighting someone like Hanako who's got metal heads. But we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, be sure to watch the lasso as it comes down from the Thresh at this point. Everything is going to be done in service to keep this Karthus alive for as long as physically possible. Get as many casts off as they can. The first Karthus ulti is going to come down, but it's not going to be able to hit the Ezreal. That was going to be a huge damage dealer who is managed to get huge damage, taking out the Karthus pretty dang quickly. Pizza will take out Keens. Meanwhile, on other boards right now, Nihil is going against Relic, doing everything they can, but Relic is still going strong off of the last stand damage.
When you imagine the way this fight must have gone, I imagine that Katarina threw her dagger, it bounced 5 times, and it did absolutely no damage. I think these Sentinels just pose such a threat to a unit that relies on her inherent burst, and Ahri just knocks her down.
It's also important to remember, too, we're currently at stage 6-2, right? Katarina has always been historically this mid-game punisher. Like, if you aren't able to get a good board on stage 3 or stage 4, she is going to run you down and make you lose a ton of health for it. But now it is going to be a little bit trickier here at the end of the day, as Nihil and Hanako are going to be going at it here. Lots of pretty scary 2-star 5 costs already here for Hanako, so that will be a pretty big boon to their board as the Kayle continues to tick away. Unfortunately, though, look at that. She's already on the Katarina. That is absolutely insane luck right there. Pathing works great in Hanako's favor, and we're going to see a cutscene taking out Nihil.
You know, I think there are various debates you could have about whether luck is skill, but I think Relic stays alive, by the way, but I think Hanako hitting the Yorick 2 and the Alawi 2 on level 8 are maybe a little bit of a high roll, and regardless, very valuable for her.
Yeah, I gotta say, both just work great for the comp because of all the stall you can get out with them. Obviously, Alawi has the tentacles. If you are able to run the Yorick as well, though, you are more likely to get those big ghouls that will also be able to stall pretty effectively, especially against something like this Ahri comp that we're looking at right now, where Ahri's gonna struggle to consistently get through some of those targets. So really curious to see how those two boards would go against each other, and we are gonna be rewarded for my curiosity, so I'm excited to see that. Again, watch this Kayle. She's going to need to be ramped here. Doesn't quite have optimal items beyond that Ginsu's Rage Blade, but even then, every little bit of anti-heal, every little bit of burn will be helpful here to keep things going at the end of the day. Over here on Relic's side of the board, though, Ahri has actually been struggling a little bit more than expected to get through this front line, so it hasn't exactly been enough so far. Big Ghoul already gonna be down. There's that stall that we were talking about, but it's now gonna be Kayle against the world, and Kayle is gonna lose, and Hanako's actually gonna go down to 0.
That was a crazy fight. We saw 2 different kinds of scaling, 2 different kinds of durability, but Hanako's just wasn't enough against the power of Last Stand, and Relic really has made a powerful statement in this game about the way that they can play around Ahri and the Sentinels.
Yeah, again, a lot of folks, including myself, sort of thought the style of playing Ahri was truly gone in this patch. There were too many things that could burst her down. There were too many things that could just generally get that backline access effectively. But the combination of Last Stand, running the 6th Sentinel here, and going all in has been working out like crazy.
Now we're going to see Relic go into the AD flex matchup. We saw Pizza struggle to get a duo carry online in stage 4, but in stage 5, they were able to find the Zed as the traditional duo carry for Ezreal. Now we're going to see these 2 powerhouses match up, and Pizza, importantly, has Lucian online. He is going to be providing so much valuable armor shred against this board.
Yeah, but remember, we saw Magic Shred coming in from that last board from the Kayle, and it wasn't enough then either. Ezreal's first ulti is going to go wide, will not be able to hit anything on that Ahri, but at the end of the day, I'm not even sure if that would be too required. Look at how much she is just tanking damage here, there, everywhere across this board. That's going to be too much for Pizza to go down, and it's Relic versus Kane Drew.
We've seen this matchup before. At that time, Seraphine was able to take the victory by simply hitting more units than the Ahri. Now, I'm not so sure, because with the Last Stand procced, I don't know if all of that damage is going to stick. But this 2-star Sona might have something to say about all that.
Yeah, that's going to be a ton of... Oh, excuse me. It's not going to be attack speed anymore. It's just going to be raw AP, which I'm honestly really excited to take a look at here, just because the sheer amount of damage that the Sona is going to be able to output, let alone through just giving it to the Seraphine, just using it for herself, is going to be absolutely insane and might be enough to get some nice early backline access. For now, though, it's all going to come down to the targeting of the Seraphine. If she's able to get the right clumps here, there, and everywhere to get things going. However, looking at the rest of the board here, it doesn't seem like there's really going to be enough. This board truly is just a Seraphine, while meanwhile on the other side it seems like there's just so much more propping this Ahri and keeping them alive. It's actually going to be the Seraphine versus the Ahri as things continue to go down. You get a little bit of Kaisa support. She's not going to be able to finish it off at the end of the day. Relic is going to send the game with their head held high.
No second chances, Protroid. That was a 1 HP victory, and that was basically a 1 HP defeat for Keens. And I think that fight, or Kangdrew rather, that fight really demonstrates the power that late game adjustments can make, and the fault that late game adjustments can expose. When you do something like try to play around this Sona, when you move those items around, one thing that actually swung the fight was the fact that Kangdrew moved the Shiv over to that Ahri, but Ahri was in the sacked position against the enemy Akali, and Shred went down really early on for Kangdrew. That meant that every one of those Sentinels was so much harder to chew through for that Sona, for that Seraphine, and that made the difference at the end of the fight, where you don't want Seraphine to be the one 1v1ing the Ahri.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, Shred has just been the name of the game for a lot of different compositions in the meta right now. It's why I wanted to talk about the Even Shroud earlier on in this game, just because being able to find that Ionic, or being able to find that, well, excuse me, I was trying to figure out why I was having trouble remembering the name of Ionic Spark, but that's what it is, so we don't have to worry about that, so we're good. It is all just, at the end of the day, a huge boon to make sure that your damage dealers have that effective 4th item slot to even further go beyond their limits, but at the end of the day here, losing it was too much. For now, though, we are going to take a very short break. When we come back, we're going to be here with Game 4. Hello, everyone. We're interrupting our previously scheduled break with a special announcement. Game 4 is actually starting as we speak, so we're going to be going right into the action as soon as the players are loaded in. And hey, what do you know? There we are.
You know, these players want more TFT, and who are we to deny them? I think that for the last game of the day, it can really feel like there's all this tension built up, and you just want to get in the game. For someone like Hanako, who is basically all but locked down that first place spot in the entire league, this is a victory lap. But for a lot of our other players, they are contesting for that top 8 position or the top 16 position in the playoffs. And that can be so valuable, as it determines whether you get access to some of the prizing, whether you get a week 1 bye, and all of that can have huge implications for your competitive future in the league.
Not only that, too, you also have other things going on as well. Kangdrew, for example, is going to be playing in Heartsteel starting tomorrow, so this is also a good bit of practice for them, just because playing in any kind of organized competitive league, that's going to be much more viable than just playing with a bunch of randos on the rank ladder.
But we're going to be getting a really interesting galaxy here, Protroid. Spatula is not one that you see a lot of top players really go for because of the way that it just introduces so much volatility into the game with the most powerful compositions like 10 Pentakill, 10 KDA, and maybe 10 Heartsteel here for Relic.
Yeah, don't you remember the glory days of Earth into double Demacia emblem going into stage 2-1? I thought that was incredibly healthy for the game, but regardless of any of that, I completely agree. We're in a very different scenario from back in the day, where now spatulas and a lot of emblems are just generally so much rarer in order to pull off, and I'm really curious to see how that's going to shape the presence of this board. What emblems are you thinking we're going to see?
Well, I think that Relic picking up the Heartsteel Chosen here is really, really going to want a belt drop from these neutrals. But 10 Pentakill is really the premier high tier, what is it called? Synergy that we see in the meta, where I think when you get it online, it just dominates virtually anything else you put up against it. Even something like 10 KDA or 9 true damage.
Let alone the fact, and ignore, oh my goodness, it's also prismatic. I don't know what's happening anymore. We got so many crazy things already happening here, so I really hope players don't get too dizzy.
March of Progress is a very powerful option if Relic wants to take it. You know, if you take this, you can lean into the fact you've been already dropped a cloak, you have an open sword and an open tier. That leans really well into itemizing the 2 backliners for country, and that could be so valuable. But we've still got that Heartsteel Chosen to think about, and it's going to be Pandora's item, so you can guarantee this Heartsteel.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how that's going to go. And another thing to point about the emblem too is that it's not just about those late game capstones where you're able to run any kind of prismatic synergy. It also lets you cheat in getting some of these later stages before you may expect them actually be able to hit them. Say, for example, 8-bit is really reliant on being able to either find a headliner and a Caitlyn or a Caitlyn in order to activate for 8-bit. And with an 8-bit emblem, you don't have to do that. So things come online that little bit earlier. Meanwhile, looks like Nihilo's decided to go for that country route that you were talking about.
I am a country lover, Protroid. One thing that you will notice about my tactics.tools is that it says my top carry is Samira. And if it's good enough for me, I'm sure it's good enough for Nihil as well, as they decide to slam it on 2-1, which in my opinion, even that might be a little bit premature.
Yeah, first and foremost, now that you've raised that, can you give me your best yeehaw?
Yeah!
That is excellent, much better than I expected. Let's go, I'm hyped. Now, beyond that too, I have also played quite a few country games. It is one of my comfort comps as well. And part of that is because there's generally not a lot of flexibility in the units that you go here. Has the country paradigm shifted at all in this patch? Or are we still going to be seeing the same 7 units in this final board?
One thing I think Nihil might have caught on to is that it can be more powerful to play around 4 or even 6 executioners than to go for the 7 country. And that may determine the way that they choose to play the board on level 7 and on level 8, because they could really be going for different rerolls than we've traditionally seen.
Indeed, and I completely agree as well. Being able to go deeper into Executioner is just generally insane, especially if you're going to be running something like the Samira that works so effectively with that 80 crit. Beyond that too, it also opens you up to the fact that you don't necessarily need to hit a country headliner in order to hit 5 country on your level 7 board, right? You're not going to be in this awkward position where you have to level up again in order to be able to hit getting in that Katarina that you would usually eschew from the board. So lots of interesting options here, and March of Progress, I am sure, will help them find them.
What's so powerful about this spot, though, is that even though you don't have a lot of upgrades, you've managed to hit Heartsteel, and that's at a very good time as well. If you were going for 2 cash outs as Nihil, you are able to get those 2 cash outs before stage 4-2, which I think is when you are going to want to do a big roll down.
On top of that too, it looks like they've hit this at a pretty good time here, considering the fact that they're going into Pizza, who has dropped the Radiant TG, which in my opinion is one of the stronger early game 2-1 augments, because you know what's even scarier than having 1 item that's worth roughly around 40 gold? Having 2 items that are worth roughly around 40 gold. So that is going to mean a probable streak coming in here for Pizza.
I completely agree, Protroid. When you look at the stats, when you look at the power of Roll the Dice, it just completely outweighs almost every other prismatic augment at the start of the game. And even though Twisted Fate has been nerfed, that Tarek has not been. He still has all the power that he gained as a 1-cost, and he really just bashes people in Stage 2.
You know, I still haven't seen anyone exploit that to try to go for Tarek reroll, which I'm still personally hurt by because I want to see our players do that, but I also think they might want to see how they're able to go into the playoff stages of the ACL. So I'll let it slide for this week at the very least. Speaking of all of that, by the way, we got to talk about some of these scenarios that are coming in here. Bobster, for example, is a player that we're going to need to make sure we're watching this fight. They are on the cusp of being eliminated here, so they're going to need a lot to go right at their disposal. Meanwhile, for Relic, they've got themselves a second spatula.
Yeah, Bobster not really shining to all his potential here in the ACL. I know that he can do a little bit better, but unfortunately the cards have not gone in his favor. As we see Relic finally slam one of these Heartsteel spats with another spat on the bench. I think that is audacious.
Yeah, I was going to say here because emblems are so transformative, right? They allow you to hit these breakpoints a little bit earlier. They let you get all these wacky scenarios like the prismatic reaches. Do you think running a double emblem composition here is better than just taking the Tactician's Crown and moving on?
What's curious to me about this position is that Relic didn't slam the Heartsteel spat earlier on in the game. Now, maybe it took a little while for them to get that belt that they needed in order to slam it, and I would completely understand. But yeah, it's very, very bold, because if you are looking for something like 7 or 10 Heartsteel, you might need more than 2 spats at the end of the day to get the most powerful win-out situation. And against some other comps like 10 Pentakill, you might need all of that power.
Yeah, again, I'm very curious to see how that is going to end up. At the end of the day, though, being able to get some of this early Heartsteel is going to be very effective just to get that econ going and try to cash out of it later, because remember, you already have the Pandora's items on your bench. That means that you can roll over those emblems and get something different as you move into the late game and start looking for your final board. So it isn't exactly the prison that I think it might be for other players.
That's a really valuable point, but in this fight, I think it is going to be Pizza winning out, but we can see Bobster setting himself up for a very powerful mid-game with Twin Terror. We've seen Twin Terror do really well today in the hands of Kurt Angle, and Bobster is well set up to play around this Vex that he's got on his bench.
So talk to me a little bit about that, because when I think about Twin Terror, I think about all of the crazy, terrifying things that happen when it gave you that bonus critical strike chance as opposed to the attack speed. Is it still optimal to be going fully into these Executioner lines, or are there other options that players can go through and could even go in this game?
I think the Executioner line, like you said, Protroid, is one of the lines that has not had its overall power changed that much by the Twin Terror rework. Twin Terror still gives you an insane amount of stats. What has changed is that you want to itemize a little bit more towards crit in your itemization, where you don't necessarily need a jeweled gauntlet, but it's more and more valuable to have something like a guard breaker or a hand of justice. Oh my God.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but in a game with this much variance as we're talking about, or at least the potential for variance with these spatulas, having a Tome of Traits drop here at stage 3-1 is absolutely huge, because it opens up to all these uncraftable items that can get absolutely insane because their power is gated behind, not being able to just get a spatula and get that working.
I'm with you, Protroid. One of the things that you could see happen here is for Pizza to pop this tome and lean into one of the verticals that we've been talking about, but you could also see something like Superfan or Mosher that could completely change the way that you get to play around this board in the mid game. But we're up against Fieldies, who's got 3 Sterex on an Olaf.
You may not like it, but this is what peak Olaf itemization looks like here at the end of the day. I cannot wait to see what happens if this Olaf ever goes below the 60% HP HP threshold just to activate all 3 of these Stereks. But still, I'm actually, oh yeah, there we go. I'm not as big of a fan just because the Titan's Resolve is usually where it's at for Olaf, just to try to get those stats going. You just get so much power out of those items that running the triple Stereks is fun. It's a meme. I loved watching it in that last fight. It's just not usually what you're looking for here.
And you know what I love is that we've had 2 randoms in our ACL games today, and they've both played around Olaf in the early game. This unit is just so fun to watch, so fun to play, and we see Pizza pop that tome. Got a lot of good options. Executioner is such a cool one, super fan as well, and Emo could also lean super well if you're trying to play around Vex as a supportive unit for Karthus.
I am loving all of this. Again, I love the emo too for the exact reason that you were talking about here, just because Karthus being able to reduce the cast time is great, not only for the subsequent cast and getting that late game AP, but also just so you can ensure that he is that cleanup crew for anything else your board is not able to get through with. And here, let's take a look at Hanako's been up to, and it looks like through hologram, she has 2 Annie 3s on her board.
You know, the second Annie 3, I'm not convinced that she is going to be quite as powerful as the first. And one other thing for Hanako here is that you haven't got as much mana generation as you need to, but this Annie 3 is still going to be very powerful in the mid game. One thing that I would like to point out, Protroid, is that Emo might be one of the most contested traits in the lobby.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting to note. We've already made sure we talked about Pizza a little bit with that. Emo is, again, another one of these not inside baseball kind of options that you can get here. I feel like if you think a lot about the emblems that people are usually crafting here, you really have to be talking about Pinnacle, you have to be talking about Heartsteel, just because of how transformative their late games can get. However, I completely agree. You can get some insane things going with that, and I will talk about that later because we have 7 Heartsteel online for Relic.
That is a disgusting benchmark to hit at stage 3-3. And when you raise the stakes, you open up so many possibilities to completely dominate the rest of the game. But look at their economy. Look at the way that they have to sack not just the rest of the stage, but the rest of their HP in order to get value from this position.
This is absolutely terrifying to see. Remember, when you raise the stakes, that's double the amount of hearts. When you're running 7 Heartsteel, I think that's ×5 or something like that. So this is the opportunity for us to see one of these insane final cash outs that can come here through Heartsteel. And it's going to be at the cost of all of Relic's HP.
One thing I gotta notice is that it doesn't seem like there's someone in the lobby who's weak enough to grief Relic's streak. There's nobody going on a 7-loss tear the way that Relic has. And that means that no one is stopping him from cashing out something like a 750 Heartsteel cash out. The only thing that's stopping Relic is the HP total.
But I do have to call something out here. There are 2 players running Heartsteel, and I believe Kendrick has also decided to raise the stakes. So we could see a world where the stakes are raised far too high for both players to truly make it into that late game.
Then I'm afraid that I have misspoken as well, because it could get very, very heated with very, very weak boards very soon.
Yeah, and honestly, I am always terrified to see how that can go here. Players always get a little bit more on the careful side. Kendrew actually deciding to level up here to get a bit of strength to try to preserve HP, but as we've said, that could very easily be their downfall.
Yeah, I think one thing that Kendrew might be looking for here is that Heartsteel Chosen, is that Ezreal to get their 7 Heartsteel online, because they've also got the +1. But are we too strong now? Have we scouted, and do we know that this board is weak enough to do that?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, because I think if you're looking at other boards like what we're seeing from Feel, I think this is definitely at the position that Kendrew wants to be, right? You're going to be able to get a couple of units taken out. I don't think you're strong enough. Are you? It's too weak, actually, in order to lose this. It seems like this Olaf is going down a little bit faster than I think maybe anticipated, but no, excuse me, there are no more items left here. Olaf can do #JustOlaf things and go through the rest of the board. So this is absolutely perfect, right? This is exactly what Kendrew wants. They got a lot of kills. They were able to get things going. Unfortunately, though, as you said, I'm not sure if they've been scouting. I'm not sure if they have noticed things just yet. All that being said, though, I believe this is their last turn before the cash out, so the window is closing for the chance of the Relic versus Kanger.
Yeah, Relic not in the matchup pool here makes me wonder if they fought at the very beginning of the stage and that enabled Relic to full send the raise the stakes. And now we can see a few final adjustments in this fight to make the board just a little bit weaker and try to guarantee that the raising the stakes doesn't hurt too badly.
Unlike Relic, Kanger has so much HP to work with here. 71 is absolutely insane just to try to keep things going. So that will be pretty useful here at the end of the day. Look at everything that Caitlyn's able to do, by the way. Cleans up the backline. The true damage emblem is a bit of an older tech, but it still works out. And with 422 stacks, this should be a pretty mean cash out.
And all I have to wonder is, what is Kanger going to get out of this? Is he going to get something very powerful for a single unit like a Radiant item? That could really inform his decision to play around a carry like Yone, for whom he's already holding and he's already got a lot of power, right? But with this much gold, wow, and it's the Radiant. So I think that this is almost an ideal spot to play around the Yone.
Yeah, I also really like that Sterix too. It works pretty good on the Yone. It's not one of these best in slot items that we think of on the late game Yone. However, it does work pretty well in a pinch. So I think you are pretty happy to see that. You don't need to take the risk of reforging time and time again. Again, I just keep looking at the side of my screen and I see Relic at 29 HP. Another Tome of Traits drop. What is going on?
You know, they really brought the heat for the final game of the ACL regular season. Are we going to get another Heartsteel emblem?
Oh my god. Oh no, you also, by the way, I need to call this out. You have the Ezreal 2 on the bench. You also have pretty good itemization as well with the blue buff already locked and loaded here. Meanwhile, look at all the stacks that Relic has. Oh, so close. Will definitely hit 750. Might even get to the next threshold, which I believe is 900, depending on how this loss goes. They're doing everything they can to make sure that they're going to lose here, and it looks like that is all but guaranteed as they go into this board.
This has my anxiety on edge, Protroid, because I think it is all going to come down to what they are able to do next turn and how quickly they can think on their feet with what the Heartsteel cash out gives them. They're going to take the loss and be at 1,000. That is a huge cash out.
Now, remember, this is going to be stage 4 too. They will have a little bit more wiggle room provided they take their final augment of the game very quickly. So we'll have to see exactly which direction that's going to go. Both 1,000 stacks, that's where you start getting to really wild and wacky territory here. Relic might be able to get a lot going here. Pick up. Oh, wait, hold on. Okay, I like this. Tactician's Crown and double Radiant items are going to be the flavor of the... Actually, just double Radiant items are going to be the flavor of them up here. That's going to be pretty insane to see. And a pretty safe 80 line here. Look at that. Even Shroud and BT picked down on top of the... Excuse me, the Deathblade you already had.
Yeah, but we don't have a lot of upgrades in the front line. We had to force level 8, and I think that we are pushing the limits of what is going to be possible when you have a Caitlyn chosen. You reforge the Bloodthirster into the Radiant Gunblade, and you reforge it again into an 8-bit spat and a Radiant Rageblade. There are so many actions going on, and that is incredible itemization for a Caitlyn, as well as incredible itemization for Shred.
You took the words out of my mouth, though. I do not really see a front line that can stand up for this at all. So, wow, this is, as you said, excellent amounts of damage, all squarely focused onto this Caitlyn. I'm not quite sure how she's going to be able to go through with any of these fights, just because look at all the stress that happens on the other side of the board, right? You have double true damage emblems from Pizza. You have a pretty nice focus coming in from that Zed as well. So all of that single target damage is going to be really difficult for them to overcome.
Terrified to see what happens in this fight, because with so much true damage on the other side, I have to imagine that this front line just completely melts. And you know, Caitlyn with the Radiant Rageblade, I was really excited about it because you do get so much power in that one unit, but Radiant Rageblade is going to ask a lot of you, is going to ask you to scale up through the fight.
I did actually want to ask you about this earlier, but I'm going to do it right now, which is the fact that we have double of these emblems coming in here from Pizza, right? True damage is something that has gone down a little bit in power. However, I think it's still really strong if you're particularly using it to get to one of those reach traits.
Yeah, but you see Pizza in this position at level 8, 0 gold. I think you are going to need to take a few more steps in order to access 9 true damage as a reach trait. And it is a bit weaker than before. You know, you do have the platinum bling bonuses, you do have all that extra true damage up to 99%, but you are going to need to have the base units to support it. And it is not going to be quite as strong as just clicking 10 pentakill or 10 KDA, yay.
Mm-hmm. And hello, we're back here. We're trying to figure out what exactly is going on with some of our technical issues. Sub-Zero Arc might be messing around with the pipes in our server room, just messing things up at the end of the day, but I gotta say, I am still very curious to see how the rest of this lobby is going to go, because again, so much is riding on the line for many of these players. You've already talked about how Hanako is fighting for Pitsy for first place. They want to tie things up. They want to ensure that they can walk in with the bye. But beyond that too, Kanedru is also getting very close to a bye, and considering how they have Heartsteel to worry about, that would be a nice thing off their plate.
Yeah, I think Kanedru really leaning into the Yone with the Radiant Steraks, the Steraks Mega Shield. That is such a cool item, and I think Yone can really succeed with all the durability that that provides. That is going to be a cool thing to hopefully watch play out.
Yeah, and I do have another bit of confirmation here right now. Nihil was also able to secure the bye just by entering into this game as well. So lots of moves already being made for these players. We did talk about how Bobster needs to see things work out. We'll have to wait to find out exactly where that's going to end up for them at the end of the day, but things are already pretty insane to see.
More broadly speaking, though, I think it's very cool to see the level of play being brought by a variety of players in this lobby and in general in the ACL, right? I think Hanako represents Quebec or French Canada in some way. Relic is going to be representing Latin America, and Nihil is going to be representing Brazil here. So this is such a cool lobby to see play out. So many different metas and styles getting to mix in this situation.
And it's what I love so much about the ACL, right? Because you have all these opportunities from players from across the world to sort of come together and just try to figure out what happens when meta meets meta. I talked about previously how you usually had the Ezreal Z composition beginning in Latin America before it started spreading a little bit more. You also see different playstyles going from North America to China to Europe, and just being able to see these opportunities from the Clash outside of all of our major international tournaments is always such a lovely thing to see, and I'm so happy that Aegis can provide a pretty clean home for that. To give people an update for where our technical issues, by the way, are, we are trying to get a clean stream of the game to get back into things. That will just take a little bit longer, so please be patient with our little podcast as we got going.
Yeah, I think that any game is going to be really cool to watch at this point, but I would really love to get back into the game that we were with, because that was absolutely insane the way that it started to play out.
Yeah, I mean, again, as we were talking about when things were just starting up, it's pretty insane to go from having such a drought of emblems in general to all of a sudden, hey, this is going to be one of those wild and wacky games where everyone's just able to hit as many of them as possible. I think I talked about this with some folks, but one of the games I got to watch during the TOC7 tournament was a loot subscription game where 4 of the drops were just tomes of traits. And that was the wildest thing I think I have ever seen. And I am so happy that I didn't play in that game, because I would have been, let alone destroyed by the tier of talent both at that tournament. Also, if I was here at ACL, I would be going pretty quickly. But the amount of variance that those emblems introduce really forces a player to put themselves in a place that they don't really have to deal with right now.
Yeah, I had a very difficult time in one of my ladder games recently, and it's embarrassing to admit this on stream in front of anyone, but I had 2 tome drops alone, not loot subscription. Me, I had 2 tome drops, and I went 5th.
Oh,
it was horrendous.
I gotta say, it's what happens though, right? Because, like, again, these are huge increases in power. These are things that let you get to those breakpoints a little bit sooner before the game really expects you to be able to get to them. And at the end of the day, it may give you incredible power, but it also gives you incredible dizziness to have to go with it at the end of the day too, especially if drop 1 doesn't quite mesh well with drop 2. So it is totally understandable. Those tomes are not exactly a cheat code that let you get free LP. I can also attest to that through somehow my games have gone through here, but now we are going to be switching things back up and going into a new game.
Yeah, unfortunately, the spectator client is proving to be the biggest villain of the night, as we are here with Mario Kart Player 5, previously known as Joe Bookmark, in a lobby which I think is going to be quite intimidating, as Mr. Mario Kart Player seems to be looking at something else.
Yeah, I gotta say, being around Joe Bookmark so much for Tri-State Tactics, they are certainly a presence, and I totally believe that they can just trounce anyone in Mario Kart just as easily as they could Teamfight Tactics.
One thing that I always know about Joe Bookmark is that he is going somewhere, and he's going somewhere fast. He's got so much bounce and so much energy that is just unstoppable, as we see him pivot away from the Kale and into what looks like Caitlyn and Ari.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see this because they both kind of do the same thing in a bit of a rhymey kind of way. Ari is fully focused on single target damage, while meanwhile the Caitlyn gets a little bit more AoE, but still has quite a bit of burst here, there, and everywhere.
I think I can start piecing together the puzzle of Joe Bookmark here. It looks like he took the Caretaker's Chosen onto one, so that is going to mean he's probably playing around this Garen or the Kale, and now he's had an opportunity to pivot.
I do have to say, because we moved into a different game, we can talk about some of the other halves of the standings right now. Pitsy specifically, who we are actually peeking a little bit as Joe Bookmark is scouting around, that's going to be pretty huge as well, because remember, they are currently neck and neck with Hanako. They both need to find these big, convincing wins in this final game of the day.
Yeah, and it's going to be challenging in either case. You can see the power that a player like Joe Bookmark has achieved in this situation, and Pitsy is in 5th place right now. Is he going to be able to put together what he needs to in order to take this to the finish line?
The Lucian 2 will be a pretty strong start, as will that Z2 is picked up by Movie. Sorry about that. Don't mean to ascribe that to anyone else. Let's take a look how that's going to be going here. Movie has going for that Ezreal Z composition, is incredibly strong right now at their itemization, as we saw previously here, and it looks like a good shot here will be enough to take the Ziggs low. Not quite enough to finish things off, but I think a second Ezreal shot should be enough to spell the win.
Yeah, the board here for Joe Bookmark is just so awkward. I think that he's got a lot of pieces to work with, and with 8 Garens on the bench, a Yorick, a Thresh, a Blitzcrank, you have so many different things, so many different ideas to put together, and you're trying to do it all on the spot.
I gotta say, this 8 Garen feels very chiefly like a Joe Bookmark special here at the end of the day, because I don't think I would advise many players to go that deep into Garen, especially because you're just running a random TG onto it. Don't get me wrong, it will still be strong at the end of the day, but I feel like there are just other resources to invest in.
Yeah, and it's stopping him from playing around what might be considered a more premier late game frontline in this Thresh and this Yorick, who would really love the Bloodthirster and Quicksilver that he's currently got on a Poppy.
Yeah, curious to see exactly which way that's going to go. Meanwhile, on the other side of the board here, that's going to be a Kale with best in slot items, as many Ginsu's Rage Blades as you can fit, as Joe Bookmark goes down to 2 HP, trying to see if they can at least outlast Pitsy, and it seems like no, Pitsy is going to be able to take down Movie, who is also going to stay down. So that's going to be pretty rough for Joe Bookmark at the end of the day. They really want this top 4. They just can't quite see how they can get there from here.
Yeah, you're flying without a game plan here, and with 2 Caitlyn's paired up, he's even skipping the Caitlyn Chosen. I think he needs a Hail Mary, and I think he needs a miracle.
Specifically, I think they need a legendary headliner, and while I think that could be a helpful thing, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be enough. Switching gears over here to Pitsy, we're gonna have to see what they're up to here at the end of the day. They weren't quite able to find best in slot Ezreal items, but they did find relatively scary Ezreal items here at the end of the day, let alone the big shot emblem that is currently gracing their Lucian.
And regardless of the way that it worked out, there are some extremely powerful items on Pitsy's units. You look at the Radiant Runaan's Hurricane on the Zed, a fully itemized Ezreal, and a fully itemized Lucian, and you really get scared for whoever you're putting up against him, because it looks like the power of Heartsteel has been brought to bear.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely insane to see. Banshee's Veil procced on one of the tentacles, so that's going to have a good amount of impact there at the end of the day. And you also have a pretty nice lineup for both the Ezreal and the Lucian to try to get something going towards the Kayle early on. It's going to matter if the RNG is going to be good enough for the Ezreal to find a clean shot. And it looks like, no, Ezreal's going to go absolutely wide. Kayle is going to just have a field day going on the rest of these units here. And it seems like the Lucian is not going to have enough. Pitsy, though, has enough gas left in the tank in order to stay alive. Let's see if Joe Bookmark can say the same. No, they cannot. So that means that we have our top four.
And a golden Nico, a regular champion duplicator, has been dropped for Pitsy. What is going to be his answer to that? Because there are a lot of different directions you could take, and it looks like it might be either Ziggs or even Zac 3.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. At the end of the day, Zacs are going to be sold, so I think that's taken off the table pretty dang quickly. I do like the option of trying to go for the big shots. However, it looks like we weren't fast enough in order to both activate the EDM and give it onto the Zed just to get that going here at the end of the day. So that is a little bit rough to see. On top of that, like we were talking about, Ezreal doesn't have the best items. He's going to have a little bit of trouble shredding through this front line like we're going to be seeing here. And it seems like another wide ulti means that actually, wait, there is enough here for Pitsy to survive a little bit longer.
And what an adjustment Pitsy was able to make at the last moment to get the power of Jazz back by playing the Senna that he had been that he had been holding with the Kiana that just found its way onto his board.
Yeah, I gotta say, this is gonna be a pretty helpful boon right here, but I don't quite know what Pitsy is holding their gold here for at this time. They have a lot of things. They have a few upgrades they can go for, right? We already talked about the potential for going for a free star 4 cost. There's also the fact they could try to go for a Kiana too, just to try to get something going. I'm not quite sure what they want.
I think for Pitsy that this is confidence showing, right? I think he is saying, hey, I already got a lot of power. I believe I'm stronger than all of these guys, at the very least strong enough to beat them right now. And what I need in order to win this game is to get to level 10, play for that one more slot. But I think he's taken one risk too many. Like you said, he didn't roll down, and Movie will take him down.
Yeah, and like I said, Movie was the other Ezreal player, had much more optimal Ezreal items at the end of the day as well. So I do respect the board strength read from Pitsy, right? It is very careful. You have to be very careful in order to ensure that you're able to keep things going, that you're able to tell what your board strength is, to try to go for some of those reaches, to try to see if you can stretch into another level, into just another stage, just to get that maximum effect for the roll down. And unfortunately, Pitsy gets the misread there, which, you know, it happens.
Yeah, I really feel for him in that position, but you have to be willing to take the risk in order to win it all. And we'll see in the bigger picture whether Pitsy's fourth here is going to be able to take him above Hanako, or whether Hanako will claim the ACL title in the regular season.
Yeah, curious to see exactly which way that's going to go. We'll have to see. We'll try to keep folks updated on what Hanako's position is, if we're able to get back into that game, or at the very least, what the spreadsheets are going to be looking at the end of this one. So for now, let's take a look at actually what some of the pings have been coming down here, which, I don't know. I see quite a few Aries. I see quite a few of these Akalis as well. So I'm seeing a lot of forecast options.
Yeah, and it doesn't look like Movie has had the resources to stop it. Tiberonson seems to have run away with the lobby in a certain way, and with long distance pals between Ari and Nico, I can see why it has been powerful up to this point. But they are going to face a final challenge, which is, can we hit one of these 4-cost 3-stars in time to win the game, or are we going to go out in third with an incredible spot?
Yeah, this is going to be pretty rough to see. It also means, not to harp on Pitsy too much more, I really would have liked to see the roll for the Zac just because so many of these forecasts were out of the pool. Regardless, though, we see this roll down happening right now. It looks like the Aries were sold to try to see if they could boost up the Akali odds. Unfortunately, though, wait, we're seeing even deeper rolls right here, selling Ari after Ari, selling pieces of this board left, right, and center to try to maximize your odds. And no, it was not enough here. Going here against this Kale board, will it be enough just to try to see if you can stay in the game that little bit longer? I already talked about how you have optimal Kale itemization. The Akali may be on there early, but the Karthus is able to take out so much of the remaining board here that I don't think it's going to matter here at the end of the day. Kale just turns around, takes out the Akali, and meanwhile, the rest of the HP.
Yeah, and it looks like Movie might have a ticket to top 1 here. Interesting use of the Edge of Night on Ezreal by playing it with Not Today gives that Ezreal much needed attack speed, and the red buff has been allowed to play on Lucian. So I think that this is a really good setup for Movie as he heads into the final stage of the game, as he heads into what might just be level 10.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see exactly where this is going to play out for Movie. I agree. There's a lot of insane thing stuff happening here on this board. You could see, again, more of the sort of cash out analysis that we sort of been forced to adopt coming into the late game of the board. I see 2 different black cleavers that have kind of come out here. I think one from a cash out, the other from an augment, if I'm reading things correctly here. And remember, that's not just all of the shred and the sunder that comes through naturally. That's an 8% damage buff for both AD and AP for all of your units just by slamming that item at the end of the day. So there is a lot more board strength here than players might be able to identify.
And Movie is really looking to challenge for that top 16 position, for that seeding in the playoffs here. If he can get one more placement, if he can get this victory, it would be the cherry on top for the ACL competitive season.
The Yorick 2, by the way, is going to mean there's even more AD shred. That's exactly what this Ezreal is looking for here at the end of the day. Again, we're going to keep seeing Ezreal ultis go wide, though. Nothing is going on to this Kale exactly when you need it. However, she is alone. She's getting moshed on, and that's going to be too much. Movie is going to be able to take it, and that's going to be the game.
Hey, I think that was an incredible finish for a game that we didn't necessarily start with, as we see Movie pick up that Heartsteel and finalize the game with a powerful level 9, level 10 board.
Yeah, I gotta say, every now and then, you're just able to play around a little bit of crazy flex, and you are able to get that final piece going.
Hey, Protroid, on the day, we've seen some incredible gameplay. We've seen a variety of 2-cost reroll, and we've seen some insane cash outs. It's a shame that we weren't able to get to the end of that crazy spatula lobby, but how about the standings?
Yeah, let's take a look at where we're ending up here at the end of the day. So very quickly, just making sure I have all of my ducks in a row. I don't want to say anything incorrect on stream because that's how people laugh at me. And I don't like being laughed at least not in that sense. Regardless of any of that, though, here we go, everybody. It looks like for now, things actually haven't rolled in too much from other lobbies, unfortunately, so we can't analyze too much.
That is a shame, but what isn't is the way that these games played out. I think we were really able to see our players get the most out of their game plans. I think the 1000 Heartsteel cash out is an insane thing to be seeing in any game, much less a competitive one.
Yeah, anytime you break that 750 threshold on Heartsteel, you know you're going to be in for a banger at the end of the day. It is absolutely insane stuff to see. And actually, it looks like we do have confirmation on some of the things that we missed in that previous game. And let me tell you, I am so mad we missed it. Kane Drew was able to hit a 3-star Viego.
Yeah, really making the most out of his stakes raising. I think that, when you look at the way the rest of the lobby shaped up, Relic with the insane 1000 Heartsteel cash out unfortunately went out in 8th. That is a very tough spot to be in. But hey, it happens sometimes when you take that risk. When you get down to, 14 HP, sometimes you just don't have the time to put together everything that you need.
Another thing I want to call out here is Hanako. She actually stayed through with that Annie through the rest of the game. Wasn't the greatest itemization, but was able to finish on 4th place. Remember, she was competing with Pitsy to try to see who would take the top spot through the weekend. Remember, Pitsy finished in 5th in that game. I don't quite know how that's going to mean for our standings at the end of the day, but it's going to be pretty dang close.
I want to say Pitsy might have taken fourth and Joe Bookmark might have taken fifth.
Oh,
but
no, you are
regardless,
correct. It's
the
double
standings
fourth,
are
yes.
going to be tight. It might even come down to a tiebreaker. We've yet to see. And hey, in the rest of the lobby that we saw, we called out Nihil's early commitment to country, and you even got a yeehaw out of me, which I've never done on stream. And Nihil was able to take top 2 with that country spot. So we can see the power of the March of Progress as well.
And thank you for sharing such a vulnerable moment with all of us. It was greatly appreciated, and I'm sure it'll be clipped ad infinitum, so be sure to look around for that in the future. Regardless of any of that, though, I completely agree. That country board also wasn't exactly where you usually see it end up. Usually, again, when you're playing country, you like playing those same 7-8 units. Here, though, because of March of Progress, they were able to go a little bit wider and find a few more interesting things. But with all that being said, I don't want to dive too deep onto a game that folks can't quite see. They're not looking at the standings right now in the same way we are. So I think with that, we're going to be starting to close things out here for the ACL. It's been an incredible regular season. And while we're still doing some numbers, tallying up who's going to be getting those buys in for week 1, there's still so much to talk through. So tell me, Invective, where can people find you on the internets?
So I'm at Twitch and Twitter at invective_ and INVCTV. Respectively. I've had an excellent time casting ACL this season. I think the new changes with the scheduling have been incredible to see. A wider variety of North American competitive players enter this competition has been a treat.
Yeah, and meanwhile for me, I'm Protroid on Twitch, Twitter, anywhere you kind of think to find the name. And I gotta say, it has also been a bit of a treat. You may not have seen me too much on the ACL side of things. I've been doing a lot on AML, just also developing commentators as well. So haven't quite been here too much. I'm also happy I was able to fill in for Soab. You can check them out on Twitter as well, and I highly encourage you to do so. They're quite intense at all of the games they participate in, not just Teamfight Tactics. But I think with all of those plugs, I believe I was able to stall enough to get the proper standings out here. So tell me, Invective, what are we looking at?
So I think that this is shaping up to be an incredible finale, but Pitsy has taken the lead over Hanako in the final week of ACL with 101 points to her 99. And that is a huge finish for Pitsy, who has really put up the hurt in every single week of competition.
Yeah, meanwhile, we talked earlier about how Bobster really was on the cusp of getting eliminated, and unfortunately for them, that is exactly what happened to them at the end of the day. So they were not quite able to get through at the end of the day, as Little Top was able to sneak on through in their place.
And that's a real heartbreaker for Bobster, who has been an incredible competitor on the North American circuit in general, but sometimes it just doesn't work out, and Aegis might have been more of a proving grounds for other things that he wanted to develop.
Yeah, and meanwhile, too, we got to talk about some of the other players that are more common faces for the Aegis circuits as well that are going to be able to move on. We already talked quite a bit about Joe Bookmark, but we also have the summer camp folks, being folks like Tarzan, as well as Indie Alex making it on through. Coach Mac, another big player that has been consistent through a lot of different ACLs, not to mention Spicy Appies also coming in here at 10th place, also continuing into the playoffs.
I'm really happy to see the way that ACL continues to be a developing ground for players like Appies and for players like Coach Mac, like you called out. They are coming from very different backgrounds, with Appies having had incredible competitive success in the past and Coach Mac developing their competitive career through Aegis. But they are coming together in this league to be able to test out new strategies against one another and to compete to satisfy that drive.
And every step that you take on a competitive journey really does push you even further, right? Because it's one thing to play normals, you're learning the game. It's another thing to play ranked, going against randos that are supposedly elo dependent around you, but we can still see some swings in any which direction. When you're playing in an organized tournament like this, it's against the same folks. You're going against the same strategies, these same mind games. We have to play 4 games in a row. Let's see how it's going to go, especially when other players are starting to read what you're doing a little bit more than they would necessarily in a ranked game. So all of these pressures come together and it becomes excellent practice, whether or not you're playing in Heartsteel this weekend.
Yeah, it's so exciting, and I would love to see all of these players return in the future. All of these players come out with a vengeance for playoffs, except for Bobster. I'm sorry, man. I'm not. And I
think on the way out.
Yeah, I mean, hey, really proud of Pitsy. Really proud of all the competitors, and this is shaping up to be an incredible ACL season.
Yeah, one more thing before we go. We already did our sign off, so we're just going to rating. I believe we actually have the confirmation. We're going to rate Relic, who is our 19th place player overall, so do make sure you give them some love as you go on through. Kane Drew, I can't confirm, was able to get the bye, so their mind can be fully focused on Heartsteel. And I think with that, that's all the time we have for this evening. So one more time, I've been ProTrade. That's been Invective. It's been so nice having you for the regular season of ACL, and we could not wait to have you for the playoffs.